My name is Saifa Shouf, and I proudly serve as both the Vice President of Engagement at FIU and as the Senior Advisor for Innovation and Technology to Mayor Francis Suarez of the City of Miami. I am so grateful to lead a portfolio team of exceptional professionals here at the city that Mayor Suarez calls Venture Miami, all of whom are focused on growing and supporting our Miami innovation ecosystem. And now, it is my absolute honor to help open today's Miami Mayor's Crypto Conference. As all of you can see from the all-star lineup of speakers and panelists, Mayor Suarez has assembled a gifted group to help us all learn more about this world of crypto, blockchain, and decentralized finance. Please make sure throughout our event to tweet about what you have learned from today's gathering. And now, I have the true honor of introducing the leader whose vision brought us all together for this Miami tech movement. Please join me in welcoming our very own Mayor of the great city of Miami, Mayor Francis Suarez. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Saif, and I want to thank you for putting this together, for all you did to prepare this, and I want to thank the Venture Miami team and my staff who have all worked together tirelessly to kick off Bitcoin 2021 this year, which is going to be the largest Bitcoin conference in the world and in the history of the conference. I want to begin by welcoming all our participants from around the world and right here who are all in Miami right now. This week, as we know, our city is proud to play host to one of the most consequential gatherings of crypto investors and funders. We could not be happier that the organizers of Bitcoin 2021 conference have chosen the city of Miami, but also that a number of other organizations and companies have selected Miami as a venue for convening their companies and their stakeholders. As many of you know, back on December 4th, 2020, this current movement for our city was launched with a simple tweet that started with 4 simple words. How can I help? And in the past 6 months since that tweet we have seen an unprecedented wave of companies, technologists, and investors choose to move to Miami. We just announced one this morning. We announced 2. We announced a fund and an Algorand platform. This week's activities around cryptocurrency, blockchain, and DeFi are emblematic of what we are seeking to accomplish in Miami. As I like to describe it, in Miami, we're in pursuit of becoming what I call the capital of capital. And this goal is about not just financial capital, but of equal importance, human capital, social capital, and cultural capital. In Miami, we've already shown that our city is willing to lead into this new world of opportunity in crypto. It is why I'm so proud that our city commission adopted a resolution back in February, which asked our city government to explore accepting fees in crypto and enabling us to potentially pay our employees in cryptocurrency. While these are early steps, they are proof that our city of Miami elected leaders are curious to lean into the future. And while today we're talking about the awesome power that decentralized finance and blockchain can bring to our global economy, we here in Miami recognize that the heart of that transformation is the uplifting of our people. We know that in order for our Miami to compete in the 21st century, we need a powerful blend of an understanding of future competencies. And it is for that reason, we were proud to be a partner in the efforts of SoftBank and Correlation One in the Data Science for All initiative, which aims to upskill 10,000 more Miamians with these skills. It is also why we're proud to be a partner in the Miami Connected initiative, which aims to bring broadband into the homes of 100,000 students in Miami-Dade County, alongside a range of other local governments, Miami-Dade College, Miami-Dade County, and Miami Foundation, Miami-Dade School Board. Today, as we listen to the awesome assembly of speakers and panelists, it is my hope that both residents in our city and folks from around the world will see that Miami is a place where we are willing to embrace the new currents of the future while harnessing the richness of our past and our thriving culture. The ascendance of crypto in some ways mirrors the seismic shift we are witnessing in our country and our world. The pandemic has ushered what some might term as a decentralization of American innovation. Amidst that backdrop, our Miami is ready to play a role as a key node of innovation and opportunity for those who welcome our spirit of building together. I want to thank you. I hope you enjoy this incredibly star-studded panel. We are excited now to kick it off with my good friend Balaji, who I see here waiting in the background. Can we get Balaji on? How's it going, man?
Hello, how are you, sir?
I'm doing.
I'm at the beach. I've got the Miami background here.
I love it. I love it. Just by way of introduction, Balaji is an angel investor and entrepreneur. He was formerly the CTO of Coinbase and is a general partner at Andreessen Horowitz. Thanks so much for joining us, man.
Thank you.
So I want to start by referencing a recent piece that you wrote, where you described that Miami demonstrates that the era of startup cities is now underway. What did you mean when you wrote that piece about Miami?
So the piece is at 1729.com/Miami for those who want to read it. But in brief, there's really kind of 4 points. First, what you've done, and Mary, your cheeks are going to glow red here, so just bear with me here a little bit, okay? But what you've done is frankly pioneering. It's something that we had sort of predicted in tech for a while, that jurisdictional competition would eventually, heat up in the era of the remote economy. But you're actually the manifestation of that prediction, and have frankly made a huge difference, not just in the US, but worldwide. And so this is the concept of CEO of the city. Any mayor, any politician, any governor in the US and abroad they've got a new model for how to build their community, and they don't need to run for higher and higher office. Instead, they can recruit people, they can sell people on their city as a product and bring people in. And even if it took 1,000 tweets to bring in a single $1 billion company, that's $1 million in equity per tweet, right? And you're doing way better than that. So that's kind of number one, right? Then number two is crowd choice. Basically, a group of people can now move together at the same time, not just one person at a time. People can communicate on social networks, be like, wow, Miami is amazing. They do the Miami Tech Week thing, and boom, or just a bunch of people collectively come in. And that'll be more and more coordinated. Number three, the next Silicon Valley is in the cloud. Basically, what that means is that we're just more mobile. We don't actually have to be physically in Silicon Valley. It's not like we're mining silicon. We're not extracting silicon out of the hills. It's all computer stuff, right? So that can be done anywhere. Might as well do it, from the scenic beach. And then number four, and this is maybe the least obvious, but I think startup cities are the cryptocurrencies of the 2020s. Not to say that cryptocurrencies are going anywhere, they're going, way north. But the thing that is as off the map that people aren't talking about yet, startup cities are going to be a huge thing this decade, just like crypto was in the early 2010s. It's kind of like, people were into it, but not everybody was into it yet. And what you've done with Miami, is basically put it on the map as a startup city.
I feel like we are at an inflection point in our world. And I also think that this is, and I've called it a sort of a generational tectonic shift, because what I saw when I put out the tweet, people often say, well, what did you think? Did you think the tweet was going to go viral? Of course, I didn't think the tweet was going to go viral. I didn't know about half of the, 90% of the things that have, subsequently occurred. But what I did sort of see right after the tweet happened was that it was almost like, the way I describe it is I see a tsunami coming. And obviously this is not a tsunami that's going to destroy a city like that. So I don't want to create any sort of bad impression, but I saw this tsunami coming, and it was a tsunami of opportunity. And I felt like I was the only one carrying a surfboard. I felt like I was the only one that said, hey, let me ride this wave, because this is happening. And really, it was for us a very slow build. People often think, and there's this saying that I often quote in some of the churches in Miami, they see the glory, but they don't know the real story. The real story is this was a slow build. We were a startup economy, right, in terms of tech, for about 10 years. We were trying to really get going. And I don't think I really ever knew what tech really was until after the tweet. And so it really has been for me an eye-opening experience. And it's been a tremendous blessing, because I've gotten to meet some of the most amazing human beings on the planet. And I realized, partly because of the trauma that my family went through being exiled from a communist country, I realized that what creates prosperity is congregation of these brilliant people like yourself and others that come together and want to build. And in the building process, you are not only building great companies that are revolutionizing the world, but you're also empowering people. You're giving them an opportunity to build, not only through your company or through the company that they're working in, but to build their own companies. And so, this sort of evokes the notion of a cloud city, which you talk about, and cloud capitals, which is something that I'm starting to talk a little bit about, this notion that We're going to have a cloud-based capital. Can you give us a little bit more insight as to how you see the future of a cloud city or a cloud-based capital?
Absolutely. And so, you actually made one comment there where, there's a saying, overnight success, 10 years in the making, right?
Yeah.
That's what you've been doing. That's what Miami's been doing. Folks who were there for some time have laid the foundations, and that's why it's going vertical now. But it's because you were in, I shouldn't just say right place, right time. It's much more than that. Luck is only a tiny percentage of it, like having a tweet go viral. It was because you had tons of execution on the ground, by yourself, by people like Keith Verboy, by Shervin, by other folks there who recruited and so on. And Shervin was actually recruiting me to Miami even like 3 years ago, right? And that was actually like basically tied, and it was a coin flip as to where I was going to go if I was going to stay in the US, either Miami or Austin. Those are the two ties. And the thing about this is, I think what people don't realize yet, you've understood it, and I think a few others are starting to get it. In the remote economy, cities can now rise or fall at the speed of startups themselves. Like they can just go whoosh like this and just gain a ton of talent and business, or like San Francisco, you just go like this. And the thing about this also is, in the remote economy, which is a new thing, every city is basically competing with every other city worldwide. And that really wasn't the case before. It's kind of like how, when the internet put newspapers online, suddenly the Kansas City Star is now competing with, the San Jose Mercury News and so on and so forth. They're all basically in the same search engine, interface. And if they're just printing the same thing and they're not differentiated, they're not going to stand out. And so Miami has its natural attributes, but it's also got the climate that you folks have been building over the years. And actually, I love this, Mayor, I'll ask you, I love this line, the capital of capital. That is amazing as a branding, as a mnemonic for Miami this decade, because you guys are already the Singapore of Latin America. And I think with the right regulations, you have the chance to be the Singapore of the Americas and bypass New York and bypass these other, places. San Francisco had fintech, New York had Wall Street, but if Miami has crypto, that's it. That's Wyoming's also, playing a tough game here. Sure. So there's some smart guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I think imitation is the highest form of flattery. So one of the things that I did in this sort of crypto revolution that we're seeing here in the city was I went to Wyoming's state regulatory scheme and I copied the whole thing. So what we did was we said, look, and this is no offense to Wyoming. I hope anyone who's watching us from Wyoming doesn't take
Caitlin Long, she did a phenomenal job. The Wyoming people, governor there has done a great job on this.
They're amazing. Yep. They're amazing. Yep. I've spoken to them and done, but I said to them, listen, and I say this all respectfully. If regulatory schemes are the same and people have a choice between living in Wyoming or living in Florida, I think we've got a good shot. And so that's sort of the way I look at it is, we can create an equal regulatory playing field, cost us nothing, literally costs zero to do that. It just costs political capital, I guess, if you will, which there really shouldn't be political capital being used to do something that's sensical. Right. And so that was my view of it. So we proposed in this legislative session, it's very difficult to get legislation passed in the first round. It passed the entire House. It passed the entire Senate, but one committee, and it got held up for a reason that had nothing to do with the legislation. So we're going to put it again with some more additions in the next state legislative session, which is next year. And I'm excited about it because I think it will pass. But I think for me, the reason why, or the way I came up with the capital was what I started to see was a confluence of capital or a convergence of capital that I have never seen in the history of humanity anywhere in the world. What do I mean by that? Right? That sounds like, great, sure, terminology, but with the PEs coming from, the private equities coming from New York and the hedge funds coming from New York and the VCs, the venture capitalists and the founders coming from Silicon Valley, there's never been a place, those are always been two polar opposites, literally even in opposite sides of the country, right? They're converging down in Miami. So they're coming, sort of one from the one side and one down in Miami in this sort of new place, which is an idea shop. And then you have all these brilliant people coming together and those capitals behave differently, right? In other words, so, private equity is looking for deals.
Different time horizons and so on.
Time horizons, different success, barometers for success, right? In the VC world, you could fail in 10 companies, but have a 1,000x return on the one successful company and you feel like you've succeeded. In the PE world, if you failed 90% of the time, you slit your wrist, right? They gotta succeed 80% of the time. They get 20 to 40% returns, right? So it's just a different model. But once you bring all that capital together, there really is no way of knowing what that's going to create. We don't know what it's going to create. That's what's exciting about it. Is, people often ask me, are you trying to attract Apple and Google and Microsoft and Facebook? And I say, yeah, sure. I mean, listen. If Amazon decides, hey, we want to do an HQ2 in Miami and provide you 50,000 high-paying jobs, I'm going to say, absolutely, please come, please, or any of those other companies. But my focus, frankly, to be completely honest, is how do we make the next generation of those companies?
Exactly.
In the verticals that we're in, right? And I think that's where we have a real shot. And if you look at, small market baseball teams, as an example, what they do is they get young talent, right? They're able to be smart about how they manage their payroll, and they develop that talent and they keep the talent. And then all of a sudden they just start winning every year. So I think we're in that sort of a phenomenon. Once we start getting a bigger deal flow, success begets success, right? That's the other sort of principle, right? Is, when you're successful, people will flow. There's always that famous statement from the movie, if you build it, they will come. Right. So, I think the fact that we have identified this opportunity, the fact that we have put a lot of hustle behind it, put a lot of intelligence behind it. And then we've been blessed, like you said, to have the Keith Rabois who put their planted their flag down, said, we're going to make this work. Right. You can say that when you're somebody who's a young billionaire who still wants to build companies, when you're Sherman, right. When you're Sherman, and done the same thing, Jack Abraham. I mean, there's so many. Anthony Pompliano, who's going to be on later today. I mean, there's so many people who have said, I'm planting my flag here. I'm going to make this work, and then start bringing people like you and others here. So that's where I came up with the capital. There's a confluence of capital here I've never seen before, may never happen again, and it may create a seismic shift in the way the world works.
I'd add two pieces to that, which are, so you mentioned New York hedge funds and San Francisco VCs and so on. The third component are sort of the crypto investors who overlap somewhat with those two, but are their kind of own group. And then the fourth are the pre-existing, like South American, Latin American capitalists. A lot of folks use, as you know, Miami is sort of it's like a demilitarized zone, a Singapore or a Switzerland of Latin America, right? And this is something I'm actually very excited about in terms of, investing outside. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, another Silicon Valley startup, whatever, fine. But,
right.
I'm excited about investing in folks, who are building companies in places or building crypto protocols in places that we haven't given as much of a look to, because there's a ton of smart people who are, in Central America, South America, and now we can invest in them remote. We can invest in them in crypto. They get crypto because there being so many currency crises and things there, Venezuela and Argentina, devaluations and so on. That's not a theoretical thing to them. They instantly get it. Folks who had to, as flee Cuba and whatnot, these people understand that, like some of the problems crypto solves. And so that combination, so those four quadrants together, I think is going to be very promising.
No, I agree. And I think, for us and sort of the way I got to crypto, just to sort of backtrack a little bit, is when I put out the tweet, part of the reason why I tweeted 800 more times in December, which by the way, I've never done. I've never been able to keep up the pace.
It was worth it. It's $1 million to tweet easily.
It's not healthy what I did, right? But, but the reason why is, and I tell people this, I discovered something in Twitter. And I've talked to even Jack Dorsey about this. I talked to everybody. I discovered something in Twitter. This is what I discovered. You know what this is? See, let me put it in the camera. This is a portal of positivity. It's this big.
Sure. Yes.
But I was able to tap into a positive group of people and they have to be positive, by the way, because when you're a founder and you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a choice. You can't wake up in the morning and say, everything's going to not work today. You know what I mean? This guy is a piece of garbage, and this one is this, and this one did this to me. And you just can't do that. You won't survive a week, right? You have to wake up and say, today I'm going to win. Today, we're going to be successful on this. This meeting's going to work out, and I'm going to get this opportunity, and it's going to happen. You feed off that. So I found this group of people, and it energized me because, frankly, it goes to my psychology, right? I'm a positive person, and I feed off that positivity. It's sort of like food for the soul.
How'd you get into politics? I don't understand. You're like a startup CEO. That's the thing I don't get. Like, you're such a rare kind of character to be in politics. I don't even understand it, but it's awesome.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. But let me.
Sure.
So I'm on this super high. So I'm on this super highway of positivity. I realize that there's an off ramp, and every time that I talk about crypto, which, by the way, just full disclosure, I was involved in blockchain technologies for 4 years prior to this. So this is not a new thing for me. I was on the Florida Blockchain Task Force. I was on the Florida Blockchain Foundation. So I had already had the beginnings of understanding how the technology worked and been involved in regulatory aspects and things like that, and been a proponent of the technology for years before that. We had actually opened a Miami crypto and Bitcoin and blockchain center. So I mean, I was involved before the moment. People often think, oh, everything happened on this day, but no. What I realized on Twitter was that every time I talked about crypto, there was this enormous community of people that were so excited to talk about it. And I fell in love. I mean, it sounds silly, but I fell in love, you know?
Totally.
I fell in love with the concept of, we can do something special. We can create, we can help along the path to mainstreaming, which is really what has been the goal. And I think we can do it in a way that doesn't create any abnormal risk for the city. It doesn't put the city in a bad position. And the first thing we did was putting Satoshi's white paper on the internet. You know, it was like I forget who it was, whether it was Pomp or someone who put out the challenge. And I think
it was me actually, but it's fine. Yeah, it's
okay. There you go. It was you. And then all of a sudden, I think we came in number 2 after Estonia. You know.
Yes.
But it was exciting, and I realized. And then when I put out the tweet, this is interesting. When I put out the tweet of what we did at the commission, right, with our employees and our payments and all that, you know, I put that tweet out on a Thursday night at about 10:30 at night. It is not the ideal time to put out a tweet. That video that I made, dark, not well lit, the whole thing, 7 million views.
Yep.
7 million views. So, you know, in having these conversations with the Brian Armstrongs of the world, with the Winklevoss twins of the world, I realized there are tens of millions of people with accounts. Tens of millions of people.
Yes. It's 100 million worldwide now. It's 100 million worldwide.
What? That is a ton of people that are holding crypto. People don't understand the scale of that.
Yep.
I mean, that is an immense scale. And you realize the community is enormous, and it is time. And look, I think there's a lot of exciting things to talk about in crypto. I've been, a student of it. I've been talking about it at a high level. There's so many things from centralization, decentralization, but I'm going to take a step back since you asked me a question. I'm going to go back and how did I get involved in politics? How does a guy like me get involved in politics?
Well, I want more Suarez's. So that's why,
Right.
It's funny. I said something like, we don't actually need 10% of the world to be like Mayor Suarez. We need 10. We basically need 10 of you in a bunch of different jurisdictions. We need the European and, East Asian, South Asian, African, Latin American, like maybe you'll take the Latin American crown also. But basically like just a relatively small number of folks who think like a startup CEO and recruit talent to their cities, provide a challenge to, frankly, the rest of the world and all these other sclerotic systems, but do so in a totally positive way because it's not an election cycle. It's not, contending for something. You are bringing in value for all current residents and you're helping new residents at the same time. So that's like a win for everybody. You're doing your job by your current residents and the new ones, which is awesome. And I think that model actually, that's a positive model, of a startup CEO in many ways. And just hearing you say certain things, I'm like, whoa, that a CEO, a founder needs to be positive. I'm like, part of it, by the way, what's funny about it is simply just having the right attitude and disposition towards tech and the stuff, recognizing this stuff is hard and not taking it for granted. It's amazing how big a deal that is versus like, a lot of the folks, just to rant about SF for a second, but a lot of the folks there really did think that because people made it look easy, that it was easy. And it's not, right? Like you watch a Hollywood movie that those special effects take a lot of work, right?
They see the glory, but they don't know the real story.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so the thing is, it's whatever number of successes for that, or whatever number of failures for that one redwood tree success, it's $1 billion. And they think, $1 billion, it's so easy to get. It's like, that's someone's like entire life force that went into that. And it's actually like 50 other people who didn't make it. And then you want to just think of this as growing on trees. It's actually pretty hard to grow those redwoods, but Miami might be a better climate for that now.
It's funny because when I was blessed, when I was elected in 2017, I was elected by 86%.
Oh, really? Oh.
People thought, oh my God, this is so easy. You know what I mean? And they don't understand that doesn't just happen by accident. It didn't, there's a lot that goes into putting yourself in a position to win an election in that fashion. And by the way, I had to hustle when I won my first election in 2009 by 262 votes. I won by 1.5%. So, there's a lot of hustle that goes into these efforts. By the way, in that election, I was down 34-9. And I tell people, but for 131 people, we may not be having this conversation. So a lot of it in life is accidental in the sense that, like, you work hard, but the outcome is never guaranteed. You work hard, but there's a lot of factors that are outside your control that influence the outcome. And that's just the reality of life. So I think positivity has to be a part of the equation. But I'll tell you, just taking a step back, maybe isn't more Francis Suarez's or 10 Francis Suarez's in the world, is because I'm a product of a very unique set of circumstances, right? I'm a byproduct of my dad, who was the ninth of 14 kids, came to this country at 12 years old. My mother came at 6. They were exiled from their country of birth, right? Because of a twisted ideology. Mm-hmm. And they had to start from nothing here. And my dad got a full scholarship to high school because his parents couldn't pay for 14 children tuition. My grandfather wanted him to go to Catholic schools in DC. My dad got a presidential scholarship to college, right? Full scholarship. Studied mechanical engineering, graduated summa, mechanical engineer, and then got 2 graduate degrees from Harvard. He speaks 5 or 6 languages, and he's written 8 or 9 books. So, and by the way, the encore of all that was he ran for mayor and became the first Cuban mayor of Miami in 1985. So I'm a byproduct of that growing up, which, by the way, for me was actually very difficult, because imagine having to live under that shadow.
Sure, that's right? A big push-up to, yeah, sure.
Huge. And but for my dad, who could have made a ton of money, who could have done a lot of things with his life, deciding I'm gonna believe in the ideology of wanting to build a city and the ideology of wanting to make people's lives better, as opposed to making my life better. I probably would have followed most of my contemporaries and said, politics, who wants to get involved in that scrutiny? Who wants to have all their finances out there for everyone to see? Who wants to be taken pictures of if you make a mistake and stand up to take a picture without a mask on, you know what I mean? And be ridiculed. Who wants that? And I would have just taken the path that a lot of my friends did. And the problem with that is that so many of my friends took that path, and I love them to death. And our generation has suffered as a result, because we don't have the same
people in public service. Yeah, the public service suffers then. Yeah, I agree with this, and actually I've been thinking about this also during COVID and so on, because in San Francisco, there's these crazy things with the school board and so on. Half of Twitter knows about this. All of San Francisco's dysfunctionalities blasted on Twitter by VCs and so on. So it's like this international thing, which is good, actually. It should be memorialized. We need to make movies about it. We're doing movies about what happened in Cuba as well. Actually, a good book. Have you read The Man Who Invented Fidel on Herbert Matthews? Okay, that's a good book to read. So it is. I'll tell you the author. It's basically about the fact that Fidel was thought to have been defeated, and what happened was the New York Times actually had a guy named Herbert Matthews. So it's by Anthony De Palma. And the New York Times, basically, Fidel had been defeated. He was in hiding or something. Yeah. And so this New York Times journalist, Herbert Matthews, actually went and wrote this huge positive interview on him. And that is how he mounted his comeback and recruited all these people and became dictator for life of Cuba.
Right.
So this book called The Man Who Invented Fidel. You should give them out at the airport or something to everybody who gets there. We should make a movie out of it or something. Anyway,
by ordering it tonight.
Yeah. So coming back, so let's see. You had some other thoughts here. Is the Silicon Valley ecosystem outdated? What are technologists looking for in cities, right? Should I address that one? Okay. So I think what we're looking for, so baseline, are those cities that are, friendly to capitalism, that allow for skilled immigration, to bring in talent and so on, that have a good regulatory environment, for the basics like incorporation and so on. All that stuff is easy. We might not incorporate as a Florida company. It might be a foreign in the sense of like a Delaware or Wyoming, or maybe now a Miami, or rather Florida corporation if you change the laws on crypto perhaps. So those are the basics. But then in addition to that would be really, if you really want to 10x it, and I'm not sure this is feasible in your city, but I'll put it on the radar. I do think that cities can stick out. You've chosen the capital of capital, and I think that's great, right? Basically just going in on being like this crypto capital. You already have pre-existing ties to New York to some extent. It's kind of a vacation destination, right? So that's great. And just going in on crypto, that alone, focusing on that, that's a $1 trillion opportunity, right? If you can set up a venture fund of some kind, and there's 15 different ways of doing this, such that the city as a whole can benefit from investing in new people, that'd also be pretty amazing. I think in addition to this, what other jurisdictions could do if they want to follow you as being cloud capitals. So Mark Anderson and I, we wrote some stuff on this actually, 7, 8 years ago, like this article, Turn Detroit into Drone Valley was one of Mark's. I had some stuff on this on, on basically special economic zones or special innovation zones, but like North Dakota could become Drone Valley, right? Or there's a place that decided to, essentially have be a sanctuary city for biomedicine that had different regulations in the feds could, decide to basically become like Biotech Valley. And the way to look at that is think about what the FDA has done on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. They kind of inhibited vaccination of the population. They held back COVID testing. There's already many routes outside them. You could do that. So you could have a crypto valley. You could have a drone valley. You could have a biotech valley. You could specialize in some area. You could be a robotics valley. And you just essentially eliminate the laws that were holding back the 21st century. And I think that's a model for cloud capitals around the world.
Yeah, that's exciting. Go ahead.
No, go, you're saying.
No, I was just going to say those are great ideas. I mean, I think for us, that's precisely what we're looking at, and that's precisely what we want to do. We want to incentivize these next generation technologies, whether it's virtual reality, whether it's biomedicine, whether it's crypto. I'd love to have a mining hub here, and I'd love to sort of dispel some of the I think myths. I call them myths of mining as a not environmentally friendly activity. I think here in Miami we have nuclear power. Nextera has the largest solar power. Nextera owns FPNL, which is our power company. They have the largest network of solar power energy in the country. So the problem here is a few things, which is interesting. One is, and I just want to touch this a little bit. One is a lot of the countries that are now mining or doing the majority of mining are co-producing countries. So
right,
clearly, you're going to.
Your tweet was awesome on this. I saw your tweet. Basically, nuclear powered, crypto mining. That's genius because the goal, is lots of clean renewable energy. It's not to pollute, and it's not artificial scarcity either. It's clean renewable energy, which solves for both problems.
But the second part of it, which I thought was even more interesting, and I thought is a little bit disingenuous of those that oppose mining, is they talk about how, right now crypto is utilizing more energy than like New Zealand or something like that, right? And they use that example. And I was just reading an article, I actually shared it with somebody on Instagram, where I was explaining to them, you have to put those numbers in context. Mining takes up about 0.6% of all the energy in the world, 0.6%, not even 1%. Hair dryers, okay, hair dryers take up significantly more energy. Drying machines where you dry clothes, right? So is everybody now going to, stop drying their clothes in a drying machine because it takes up a lot of energy? No. The fact that we are doing activities that require energy in a technological world is only going to get greater. It's not going to get smaller, right? So as advancements happen in technology, you need power, you need energy to power those advancements. So the fact that it takes up a lot of energy is not a negative thing. It's how you produce that energy. And by the way, we have the largest power plant in the solar system, which is the sun, and it's free, right? All we have to do is harness that energy and make it distributed. And we can, or have it, decentralized, like to use a word from the crypto world, you can decentralize it on rooftops and have battery storage where you have it as a decentralized system. So I think it's kind of a little bit of an overblown thing, and it's I'm used to it because in Miami, what they love to do to us is counter-brand us.
Yeah. So it's funny, like people living on in New York. Or like San Francisco, which are both, by the way, coastal things, being like, oh, Miami's going to get flooded. Well, that you're also living in a coastal zone, number one, right? But number two, by the way, on the energy stuff, the exact numbers are all estimates because nobody has every single Bitcoin mine and knows their consumption. But I'd also say that, the Cambridge study last year before the current boom pegged it at 100 million people worldwide who own crypto. Now it's probably 150 or 200. I don't know the numbers, but it's a lot, right? That's like bigger than Japan, right? That is like, 4x Germany or something like that, 3x Germany at 60 million people. Actually, no, Germany's 80 million. Okay, it's 2x Germany, right? The thing about that is you're talking about guarding the property rights of like 100 million to 200 million people. So this is like, it's a nonviolent police force.
I mean, 2/3 of the size of the United States.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So it's like a nonviolent police force, a nonviolent military that guards digital property rights online so that they can't be seized. And this miracle works across borders, non-violently, opt-in, right? And all you need to do is energy. You don't need, like, everybody in the world who holds cryptocurrency knows how much cryptocurrency they have. And it doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican or Israeli or Palestinian or what have you, like, they all agree on what the state of the Bitcoin blockchain is. They know their balances. That's this absolute miracle where people really underestimate how much that is. As trust has become scarce, we're fortunate that computation has become abundant. And what blockchains let you do is turn computation into decentralized trust. It allows us to scale systems even as like legacy forms of trust are going down. So I think the energy thing is a dead letter, but I think that the nuclear is a great thing here. There's something else actually I wanted to raise, two other things, which I think of as interesting Miami opportunities. One is that, as an equatorial location makes it sometimes, easier to do rocket launches and so on. So I know that Cape Canaveral is about like 3 hours away. Yep. I wouldn't be surprised if some space startups, like set up shop in Miami. Maybe that's already happening.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
So the other thing that I think is sort of a sleeper, but one of the reasons I was thinking about relocating there is Miami is a cruise ship capital of the world,
yes,
right? And I think that cruise ships, they had a hard 2020 due to, COVID and so on, but cruise ships are really underrated in terms of practical seasteading. So what you could do is, and I've talked about this for a while and thought about this, I'll put this free idea out there. You could crowdfund the crypto cruise ship. Okay. You could have a few hundred or a few thousand people just group buy a cruise ship and live on that. And now they could go port to port. Miami is home base, right? Go around the world. It's not as easy today. Everyone will need to get vaccinated and so on. But a few months out, I bet a lot of these hurting cruise liners would love to have subscription revenue rather than episodic, revenue, because, that would be actually transformative for their business model to book it out 365 days a year versus, like making that customer, acquisition anew every couple of weeks. So these are a couple of, both existing and new business lines, in addition to basically just, being the capital of capital that I think you guys could get into. And it's interesting, right? Thinking about a city as having business lines like this is pretty cool.
So I'm going to put you in touch with some cruise executives offline at another point. I think that's an awesome idea. But I want to go back just for 2 seconds, and then I want to talk about one last topic, probably the last 10 minutes. And I'm having so much fun here. So I hope you're having fun, because I'm having a blast.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
So I wanted to go back and say two more things on the energy issue. One on the coastal cities issue and one on the energy issue. On the coastal cities issue, people don't realize that New York suffered, check this out, more hurricane damage than Miami in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and they were flooded. There's I forget what year it was, but there was this like,
Sandy, it was Hurricane Sandy. Yeah, it was Hurricane Sandy. So it was devastating to them because they are not resilient, right? We have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on hardening our city to become more resilient to climatic phenomenon, and they have not. So they were devastated when they had a hurricane that hit them. So we've had, and we just started hurricane season June 1st. We've had, and this was according to my building director, so don't quote me if this we've had 2 category 1s. Category 1 is the weakest of the 5 categories. 5 is, of course, the most severe. We've had 2 category 1s and 1 tropical storm hit us in the last 20 years. Okay, so it's important to talk about the facts, just because the facts provide context. Going back to the energy thing, in the same article that I sent to the person on Instagram, it talks about how the energy consumption of according to these statistics is greater than, and it talks about like 3 South American countries, right? One of them I remember was Argentina. And it says the energy consumption is greater than Argentina, but you know what? Argentina's GDP is 455 billion, and the total the total value
is $1 trillion plus.
It's $1 trillion plus. So you're using the same amount of energy to guard $1 trillion of assets versus the same amount of energy to guard 450 billion of assets. So it's just so sort of off scale and out of the sort of understanding of what it is. I want to shift a little bit of gears here. This is not even on your thing, but I know you can handle these questions because you're
of course.
smarter than me on all this. To me, the big discussion, the big debate is, okay, I think a lot of the crypto, and particularly Bitcoin, just to go on Bitcoin, has certainly established itself as a store of value, right? That is indisputable at this point.
Yep.
You know, Bitcoin has basically established that one of that, you know, cryptocurrency or whatever is worth significantly more than the US dollar, right? So for me, that the proof of concept of crypto, to me, that's done. The proof of concept is over. I mean, you've already established a medium of exchange that is cryptographically protected, that is efficient, even though it may not be as efficient for a currency, but it's efficient, right? And it's relatively inexpensive, particularly as a store of value, right? And it's decentralized, so it's not pegged to any government, and it's very elegant in that sense, right? And that to me is a success already, because if it wasn't a success, it'd be at 3 cents, 4 cents. The fact that it's at 39,000 or 50,000 or 60, it doesn't matter what. It's just way beyond successful at this point. So that to me is almost like yesterday, right? So to me, tomorrow is what emerges as the currency, right? The actual currency, the thing that we trade for goods and services. And will that thing be tethered to a central bank? And the reason why I say that, I'm sure you know, is because now even the central banks are creating their own cryptocurrencies, right? China just came out with one. I know the U.S. government is working on one as well that should probably be released soon. And all of that, of course, is tethered, or it's not even tethered because it's not a separate. It's not like a stable coin, right? It is actually U.S. denominated currency that is crypto, right? But it still has that same tether connection to the central bank policies, which is what creates, I think, the anxiety, and it creates the concerns. How do you solve for that issue? I just want your insights on that.
Sure. So is the question of how do you get a stable currency without central bank risk? Is that the question?
I think that's sort of the question, right? Is what will be the technology, or if you can identify it, or has it not been created, that will create that central currency that is not tethered to a central bank, which, by the way, we can talk about the benefits of that in a second. And that will be inexpensive, that will be fast, right? And that will sort of supplant. Will it supplant fiat currencies, or do you believe we're heading in a world where fiat currencies will be supplanted by a cryptocurrency?
Well, I think we're already in that world partially, and we'll get there more so. So it's an interesting point, because when people talk about stability, they're talking about price stability, right? They're basically saying, hey, this thing costs this many dollars today, it's going to cost this many dollars tomorrow, for a very wide basket of things. Sure. What I actually think we're entering is an era of increased priced instability for fiat currencies, because they'll be not stable coins, but inflation coins in some ways. You're already seeing that in, food and lumber and commodities and so on and so forth. Absolutely. And so, for something to just be flat is actually kind of hard. And I think the environment we're going to enter, you're going to have things that are going up and to the right and things that are going down like this. There may be averages or hedges of various kinds of things. This is actually one of the things I tweeted about, is developing, on-chain inflation feeds, so people could actually do price comparisons and then plug in their personal basket of goods and then sort of hedge against that and be like, okay, I have enough purchasing power under these assumptions to make it out 5 years, 10 years, even under assumption of possible inflation. I'll hedge against that, pay something today to insulate against that possibility tomorrow, just like hurricane proofing, right? It's not 100% that it's going to happen, but it's a possibility that one should be prepared for. And then you pay a little bit today so that your windows don't get smashed tomorrow, right? So that's one thought, is that basically fiat currencies in general are going to become more unstable. With that said, there's some that are potentially better managed than others, like, the Singapore dollar, the Swiss franc. These are things that have a reputation for sobriety in monetary policy. So, you could imagine stable coins being made out of things like that. You could, these things already have international capital accounts, and they're basically international currencies. They're like, I forget what ranking they are in the world, but the Swiss franc punches way above its weight. So that's like a possibility of something that's not a dollar, but it is a fiat currency that's got there. There's a second possibility, which is a little different, which is something like DAI from MakerDAO. And that's something where it is effectively pegged 1-to-1 to a dollar, but using Ethereum as opposed to using dollars. So the mechanism for it is they hold enough Ethereum such that, they hold like $50 million of Ethereum and issue, let's say, $10 million of dollars, such that as long as the price of Ethereum doesn't crash 80%, then they're good for it in Ethereum terms. So this way they're holding something, but it's not
dollar-backed Ethereum essentially, instead of like a gold-backed dollar.
It's an Ethereum-backed dollar, but yes, exactly. That's right.
Ethereum-backed dollar.
And so that's a different mechanism. It solves one part of it, which is it's bank independent, right? Because it's purely on chain. The only thing you need to get on chain is the price information of the ETH/USD ratio, right? So to know whether your Ethereum reserves are good enough to back it. But it doesn't solve the other problem of the dollar itself fluctuating or inflating significantly against other currencies. As I said, I'm not sure that can be solved other than,
and I'm going to click off. I just wonder, and we're getting low on the time. I just wonder, if there will ever be a non-centralized substitute, right?
So it's funny you say this, because one thing that, Patrick Stanley actually is going to probably launch something, I think, later today. So I'm not stealing his thunder here, I hope, but he'll launch it soon. City coins. So, one thing that's interesting is there's, UBI mayors and there's laser-eyed mayors, right? And one thing they can probably both agree on is their cities are in tough shape after the pandemic, and, local currencies would be good. Ithaca did this with Ithaca Hours. A lot of other, cities and states have had this kind of thing, at some point in the past or present. And I think that city coins are going to be a major thing where, you could have, for example, a Miami coin. I think Patrick will talk about that, but basically a Miami coin that, is something that the city government has a good chunk of and can allocate to help boost Miami. And then you could do things where if somebody holds, $100 of Miami coin, they show they're loyal to the city and they can get into bars or they can get into restaurants. And you have something where there's sort of an aspect of being a citizen of the city where you're hodling that coin, and you can do a 10-year hodl, a time lock, to show that you're loyal for a long period of time and so on, right? So that's something where I think is going to be a big trend potentially over this decade. That's how crypto and startup cities kind of link up. I think every startup city worthy of the name will have a cryptocurrency issued to its citizens. That's its internal currency, its loyalty coin, in other ways, something that differentiates it. And then local services are built around that. And then you can have dashboards which show like, okay, this kid helped a little old lady across the street. These people did some graffiti cleanup. These folks recruited someone to the city. These folks, went and fixed this broken window, and you just give them $50 in Miami coin or whatever, right? You can give that online, and you can incentivize the beautification and the sort of positive sum, kind of attitudes towards the city. So I think that's going to be a big.
So we have a minute left, and I'm gonna try to close this and give you a little closing time.
Sure.
This has been awesome. I mean, we're having so much fun. I could probably talk to you for another hour.
Yeah.
I want to close by saying this is what I think. I actually think that there will be another technology, and I don't know if it'll be Bitcoin Cash, or I don't know if it'll be another Bitcoin type of concept that will be decentralized, will not be tethered to a central bank, and that will ultimately serve as a currency that people will decide will supplant, just like we've supplanted sort of the store value, they will supplant all fiat currencies. And I believe that will happen. I believe it's inevitable, actually. And the reason why it's inevitable is because it takes away all central banks' ability to control, use their fiats as an instrument of policy. And so they all have to play on a level playing field. What do I mean by that? That means that if the federal government wants to indebt itself, okay, that's fine. You borrow money like everybody else. You pay an interest rate like everybody else, but there is no bailout mechanism. You're not going to be able to just print money to bail yourself out of the situation. So you have to have discipline. You want to start a war? You better be sure you have enough money to start a war.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's right.
Because you can't just print your way out of it, right? So it's going to, I think the world that we're heading in is going to create much more fiscal discipline for governments, which I think is a good thing. They're going to have to be on the market dynamic. They're not going to be able to create their own markets. I think it's a very scary world for them, right? Because fiscal discipline has never been part of the discussion, right?
Exactly.
And in fairness, there's a second piece to this, which is what happens when there's crises. So I'm going to leave that hanging out there, right? Like when there's a crisis, like a market crash or a pandemic, where there has to be an injection of the money supply. how do you work through that? And I know these are sort of high level concepts. I don't want to get too esoteric and abstract. I'm going to give you the last one. We're already a minute over.
Yeah. No, actually, you sort of just tickled something in my head there because, I'd just been thinking about the mechanics of getting an inflation feed on chain, right? And this is a little mathematical. So, audience, please excuse me, but basically, what you're asking for is effectively an on-chain instrument, which is stable against a wide variety of prices, right? Like that's to say, it is a stable coin. It may not be $1. It could be something like a Swiss franc, but it is stable. And what that means is you need to have lots and lots of prices on chain. And this instrument, you need to record its price versus those things. How much of XYZ does it cost for, some milk or some eggs or something like that? And, now that I think about it, like really what you're solving for is similar to a matrix inversion. You're basically trying to ensure that this instrument remains stable across many different prices at the same time, with maybe some budget to pay for that stability so that you buy more of this, sell more of that. There's a lot of different effectively markets that are happening there. So let me put some thought into that because I feel that there is something here to what you're asking for, which is essentially a state independent stablecoin, which is kind of an interesting concept. Yeah. So you tickled my brain, Mayor. I may write something up.
A lot of good things to talk about. I left some things out there in the air that I think are exciting topics to discuss. Balazs, it's been so much fun having you on here. Thank you so much for honoring me and our city and this pre-conference that we're doing with your thoughts and your brilliance. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for doing so much for the city and for the world, frankly. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Suarez and Balaji, for that riveting opening one-on-one discussion. What a great way to kick off our Mayor Suarez's crypto conference. And without further ado, we have our first panel. And we are so very excited to welcome our moderator, Camila Russo, as well as our panelists, Jalak Jobanputra, Steve Kokinos, and Preeti Kasireddy. Over to you, Camila. Welcome to the stage.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. Amazing to be here in Miami, where I actually spent some time living. I grew up here. So amazing to be moderating this great panel of speakers. So I'll give a brief intro on each, but I'd also like to kind of go around and everyone kind of give us additional background. Preeti is an entrepreneur and software engineer. She has led startups, Sapien AI and True Story. She was previously banking analyst at Goldman Sachs. She was at Andreessen Horowitz as a partner, Coinbase software engineer. Amazing kind of crypto resume. Also, Jalak, founder of early stage venture capital fund, Future Perfect Fund, which has backed some incredible crypto portfolio companies. And she's been a venture capitalist since 1999, and an investor in Bitcoin and blockchain tech since as early as 2013. So a real OG. And Steve Kokinos, I hope I'm pronouncing your name okay. So Steve is the CEO of Algorand, which builds blockchain infrastructure, including the Algorand proof of stake blockchain. And Steve is a serial entrepreneur. He previously co-founded Fuse, Blade Logic, and WebYes. So a true builder as well. So amazing, kind of well-rounded panel. But yeah, if you guys want to give additional background and maybe talk about kind of the specific thing that you're kind of working on, investing in, like most excited about right now, and maybe Preeti, you can start.
Sure. Currently, I'm investor / entrepreneur residence at Samsung Next. That's the venture arm for Samsung. Personally, what I'm interested in right now is, I think it's hard to say one specific thing that I'm interested in, because we're still so early in crypto and there's still a trillion problems to solve. And we're seeing entrepreneurs doing all sorts of different things. And so personally, what I find most exciting is some of the more user-facing stuff, and solving some of the pain points that touch the user directly, because I think a lot of the development that's happened over the last 10 years in crypto is infrastructure for the right reasons, because we need that infrastructure. But I think we're starting to see some of the early inklings of some of the more consumer-facing stuff start to get developed. And so I'm on that lookout for things that improve the consumer experience.
Jad, I'm sorry, I also wanted to check if I'm pronouncing your name right, but
Perfect. So,
okay, great. Okay, yeah, so you can provide additional background as well.
sure. So we're currently investing out of our third fund. Started the fund in 2014 to invest solely in blockchain tech and crypto, and have seen kind of this amazing growth over the last 7-8 years since we've launched the fund. And as Preeti said, like a lot of our earlier investments were on the infrastructure side. And because I invested in the early internet, I viewed, any new technology needs to go through that infrastructure build out before applications and scalable applications that, now billions of people around the world can actually use. And I think we're getting into what I consider the next 5 to 10 years of the golden age of crypto, where we will see the build out of many of these applications, because we've seen so much of the infrastructure and the heads down building, through several crypto winters. I'm very excited, and the reason I got into crypto was the potential to offer kind of investable assets to the broader world, right? And Bitcoin is just one piece of that. Different cryptos are one piece of that. But tokenizing buildings and tokenizing virtual real estate, real assets, and combining that all into wallets that people can actually own themselves and invest in, and we're actually starting to see the first companies actually get to scale, or that we're starting to invest in, that can realize that vision. And we're very focused on investing globally. We always have been. We were a founding investor at BitPesa in Africa. And so I also am keeping an eye on regions around the world that don't have legacy financial infrastructure that can actually leapfrog through this technology.
So interesting. And I love that headline. As a journalist, I'm kind of thinking in headline terms. So it's like the next golden age of crypto is a great line. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love what I'm hearing so far. And I guess first, I just sort of like thank Mayor Suarez for hosting this. I think it's great to have an event that's accessible to everyone. So really excited to participate. I think from the standpoint of Algorand, it kind of follows on to some of the things that Shalak said, which is we think that building out the infrastructure is really important, and having the bandwidth needed so that anybody can transact. I think beyond that, though, there's a need for dramatically better both developer experiences and user experiences. And so I think what we're excited about is some of the tooling that is being built that makes it much, much easier for people to build blockchain applications. And I think that's what's going to lead to an explosion of both developer activity. And I guess just like one quick thing is that, there's only about 50 or so thousand developers who build on blockchain today, but there's almost 20 million that build for web and mobile. And we think encouraging more of those people to enter the ecosystem is really what will lead to, many new applications and really interesting use cases for the community. And just specific to Miami on that end, we announced this morning along with the mayor that Algorand, along with Borderless Capital, are investing $25 million to build an accelerator and to encourage new companies to do just that and develop in Miami. So not excited broadly to build infrastructure, but also excited to participate in the local ecosystem here.
So, yeah, I mean, it's amazing how Miami has really shot into the kind of the forefront of crypto, becoming this kind of crypto beach, crypto coast. Yeah, really great to see, and yeah, great to hear that you're funding an incubator. Very cool. And so, sort of building on that theme of the need of better tools for blockchain developers. Preeti, you certainly have experience here, as you know, working at Coinbase and your experience at Andreessen. So right now, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on what you think the challenges are for crypto builders.
Sure. I think there's a lot of challenges. I think, first of all, like when a developer comes into the space, it's like everything is so dispersed and there's so many different ecosystems that are somewhat isolated. And so as a developer, it's like, how do I know where to start, right? Like, should I start building on Ethereum? Should I start building on Algorand? Should I start building on Cardano? What blockchain do I even start developing on is a question that developers ask me all the time. It's like, how do I know where to start? And so let's say they figure that out, and then they get into one ecosystem. At least, I mean, things are getting a little bit better now with developer tooling, but at least when I was sort of developing smart contracts a couple of years ago, it was like there were a lot of tools, but there was very little documentation and stuff like that for developers. And one of the most important things for developers is documentation, because without that, like, it's really hard for developers to get onboarded into the tooling and so forth. And I think, for example, in the Ethereum ecosystem, you saw that massively change because they realized that was a pain point for developers, and they went through a massive investment to upgrade their documentation and make their website more easy to use, make it easy to onboard people on how to develop on Solidity and all that stuff. Another big challenge is smart contract development is very, 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 very different from traditional development. Because traditional development follows a very you're iterating. It's an iterative development, and you have the ability to, if you have a bug, you have the ability to easily push an upgrade to that code on almost a daily basis or even hourly basis if you have to. The same is not true with building smart contracts. So the frame of mind that developers have to come into when they're developing for blockchains is very different because they're pushing this code that's just permanent. And so it can't have any bugs. And so it almost requires like a perfectionist mindset. And I don't know if that's the future and if that's how it will always be, or if we'll create some kind of middle ground where developers can create, blockchain applications without having it be such a high hurdle. But at least for now, it still is, and making upgrades to smart contracts is really, really hard. And so for a developer that's coming in from a traditional software development background, thinking about that and framing development in that way it's a challenge. I'm curious to hear from Steve as well what challenges he sees developers facing, because you're touching the tooling as well.
Yeah, I think there's a few different ones. I think you raised definitely good points. I think, kind of lack of clear documentation and how-tos is something that's a big problem, although I agree that that's improved a lot. And it's something that I think, the smart contract world is starting to take some inspiration from, the more traditional development world. I think that in terms of, if you look at the long tail of developers, we start to get into millions of developers. I think there's a couple of big problems. One is that people don't want to learn new languages. So one of the things that we've focused on, as an example, is just having it be simple to write smart contracts, whether you're a JavaScript developer or a Python developer or others, so that they're not really learning all new stuff because that's a heavy lift for people to do. And so I think that's one element, is that just having more general purpose languages that then can safely tie into smart contracts I think is an improvement in experience. And we actually have a partner, Reach. They have a JavaScript-like language that makes it very simple to deploy smart contracts. The other part of that, though, and you brought up security and safety, I think that is a huge issue, because in the smart contract world, if there's a bug, it means people lose money. And I think that's different than a bug in a traditional web application where, it might be slow or something might not work right, and you can, recover from that. And I think what that's led to is, big need for formal verification and auditing of smart contracts, in addition to people just developing carefully. And so we're definitely big believers in the need for automated verification and auditing of code, and being able to sort of programmatically assess risk levels. So, there's a lot that's we're working on, that other people are working on in that area too. But I think that's going to become, one of the next big scalability bottlenecks for sure is this whole security problem. And so, but I think it's sort of a multifaceted issue where, in part, you need to bring not only good tooling and making it simpler, but you also just need to meet people where they are and let them code in the languages they already know. And then kind of on the other side, make sure that you make it easier for people to code in a safe way and do everything you can in the tooling to keep people from getting out of trouble in the first place, because ultimately that'll make it much more scalable as things grow.
Yeah, and things like WASM, which allows you to code in any language and then compile it down and use it in blockchain settings, I think are going to be huge for the blockchain world, because as to Steve's point, it will allow developers to develop in the language that they know, and then sort of it get compiled down to the language that the blockchain is encoded in. So I think it'll get a lot better. I think we'll see the developer experience. I think we're already seeing the developer experience get better, but I think in the next 2 to 5 years, it'll get even better, and we'll see a lot more people move into the blockchain space and developing. So it's exciting.
I agree. I think it's going to be an exciting time. There's a lot of momentum with new people entering the market. So I think these are sort of virtuous cycles that tend to, self-propel once they get to, enough velocity.
Super interesting points. I mean, obviously, for both users and developers, there's this kind of learning curve that needs to happen when getting into crypto. And for developers, it's first this choice of like where to build. There's like so many different layer one options, what new language they need to figure out, what tooling they need to figure out. And also like something that starts to touch on the user side is smart contract bugs, like Steve said, have real kind of consequences in people's pockets. Like these are like money Legos that they're building. So it's like even more important that there really aren't any bugs. And like Preeti said, like this is code that gets kind of, when it's put out in the blockchain, like it's out there forever. So it's just so important to get it right first. And we've seen so many hacks recently, especially in DeFi, millions lost in flash loans. So I agree. This is kind of like it's becoming a scaling problem. For DeFi to reach the mainstream, these applications need to be safer. And so for Jalek, interested in your point of view as an investor, a long time investor in crypto. How do you decide and kind of value founders and teams and make sure that they can figure out all these challenges in their kind of road?
Yeah, I mean, I view the crypto sector and blockchain tech in general as a very different kind of sector to invest in. As you noted, I started investing in '99 out with Intel Capital out in Silicon Valley. I was on Wall Street doing TMT banking before that. And there were pretty tried and true business models like SaaS. It's pretty clear where the revenue comes from. And, crypto from the beginning has been, there's all this potential, but the business models are still being figured out. And my view has always been that the business models are going to look dramatically different than what we've seen in the past. And that's what got me excited. It's really the first time since the internet that we're going to see, and when I say the internet, I'm talking about broadband connectivity, mobile connectivity is included in that phase of computing, where I think we're going to see more community-based models. We're starting to see that with DAOs, with all these companies trying to figure out the protocols, figuring out the right crypto economics for different use cases. That is all very foreign to most VCs, but that was what intrigued me and got me really excited about, we can't keep doing things the same way because we're not reaching enough of the world with enough services. And I felt like blockchain tech could do that. So to get back to your question on what we look for, it's really entrepreneurs who share that view of the world, that this these are hard problems. I mean, we just talked about, developer tooling is an area that we've been focused on investing in, over the last couple of years, because we've seen that need. We believe in a multi-blockchain world. We think there are some amazing protocols that are emerging that are going to be great, great infrastructure for different use cases. And so I've always been interested in interoperability and how we can create this global network of blockchains with the right connectivity and the right developer tools, so that it can run in a more automated fashion. And so we look for entrepreneurs, that kind of share that vision, that also realize we've been through, since 2014. I mean, I started my first fund in a crypto winter on purpose, because I have seen over the years that it's the downturns when you really see who's passionate about building and who's passionate about the world, this new world, and using the technology towards building this better world for all of us. So it was a very deliberate kind of move on my part to start the fund. After Mt. Gox blew up, people thought Bitcoin was dead. And we've been through 2 significant crypto winters. I don't know what you call what's going on now. I'm not including that yet, but it's and our 2014 vintage of companies are going so strong, and that's because we invested in entrepreneurs who had the resiliency, who could ramp up and ramp down. They understand that changing the world is not a thing that happens overnight. And they're in it for the long haul, and so that's what we look for, first and foremost. And then having high ethical standards is important to us. Not taking shortcuts, and that's really that's where the real value will come from in the longer term.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think to add to your point on business models, that's a really interesting and really nuanced but really big point, because traditional VCs, it's like you have a business and then you're like, okay, what's the business model for this business? With crypto companies, no VC is asking the question of what's the business model, because it's ingrained into the network, it's ingrained into the protocol. So the business model question doesn't exist for investors anymore. It's all about, can this network accrue value over time? Because if it can, then the business model is obvious. So I think that's a huge paradigm shift for investors.
Yeah, and not every investor will be able to make that switch, and it's exciting to be at the forefront of that, and also learn from my peers that are doing that, and thinking creatively about new business models. There's so many great funds that have emerged out of the last few years, and that's really exciting to see.
This is such an interesting topic. I just would love for you guys to maybe dig into kind of this new business model idea. Like, what does this actually mean? Because I think kind of the big difference here is that what you're investing in is actually a protocol that's open, that doesn't always have like this traditional corporate structure where users are. I love this concept where users are also owners of the applications that they're using, and obviously the way to have that ownership is this token. So like what, like, I don't know if you can kind of do this in like a summarized way, but like how does running a traditional closed Web2 application and company differ from running a protocol on a blockchain? And maybe Steve, like you can take, because you can start.
I was going to say, I mean, I guess I have experience now in both worlds. I think it's certainly different, right? I think there are some similarities, but I think in a traditional business, you have something that you're selling to some other person, whether it's a business or, a retail user, and you receive money in exchange for that. And the goal is to do that as much as you possibly can. I think there are some businesses in the crypto world that act that way. I think when you look at layer one protocols like Algorand, or some of the interesting layer two protocols, DeFi protocols, and others that build on top of layer one. I think one of the big differences is that really we're building infrastructure and no one party controls it. I think that's one of the most fundamental parts of kind of the decentralized public network world. And what you really have to think about is how you attract developers, how you attract people into the community that are going to then help in turn help generate network effects. And so it's really a different, there is certainly a business model, but it's a different, a really different way of thinking about it. And ultimately, I think one of the most, different aspects of it is that ultimately, if you're successful in kind of launching a network that a lot of people use and gain traction, then the people who created it in the first place, become almost irrelevant in that. And so I think in a way, it's sort of unusual that I think in the traditional world, you're trying to build, as big a business as you possibly can. I think in the crypto world, what you really want is to kind of bootstrap things, but then ultimately have it take on a life of its own, and where sort of the creators are almost sort of left as irrelevant at the end of the day, because the network has sort of flourished and has lots of participants in it. And so it is sort of a fundamentally different mindset, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, and I think a good way to think about it is like I think we'll move away from calling these things businesses or crypto company and calling it a crypto network, because that's what it is. The business only exists in the short term to bootstrap the network, but then it sort of dissipates, ideally, if it's trying to be truly crypto native. And so I think, traditionally we have LLCs, right? And then you're, like Steve said, you're building a product for your consumers. I think how we think about businesses, even the concept of LLCs will sort of go away, and it'll be like a new almost way to incorporate these, I don't even know what you want to call it, networks or businesses or something. Because it's just a completely different paradigm. The way that you're structuring all the different participants in the, all the people who touch the product or the service is so different from day one, like you said, because there's users who are owners. The team who traditionally used to own most of the business doesn't actually own most of the business. So the whole thing, the way we think about it will completely change. I think we're in this like transitionary phase where we're trying to still have a business that launches these networks, but I think that could change in the future.
I just to tack on to that one, I think really, if you take a step back, we're building the internet of money. And, I think in the early days of the internet, you might have cared who your internet service provider was, or some of the like technical particulars. Nobody, like, I don't know who's providing the internet where I am now. It makes no difference, right? It's a utility like running water or electricity. And I think blockchains are for sure the networks for which the people convey financial transactions and value. And so really we're communicating value and money on these networks. And yeah, I think interoperability is going to be a very important part, and others, but absolutely. I think one of the big differences though between say early networks, if we just switch gears a little bit, and blockchain networks, is that the people who built the protocols of the internet originally didn't have any real financial tie to that necessarily, right? There was no way for them to earn or have a financial stake in that creation, whether it was the web or sort of other elements. I think one of the really fascinating elements of blockchain networks and crypto is that through tokenization, now the creators of different forms of protocols and the early participants who helped build them and launch them now can have a financial stake in that. And so as those networks grow, it advantages those people as well. So it is there are sort of interesting subdynamics here, but definitely agree that really we're communicating value as opposed to communicating other information. And that over time, I think people will come to just think of these underlying protocols as networks and not really as businesses at all, because I don't think they are traditional businesses.
Or we'll just be redefining what businesses are.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So interesting. And this concept of early creators or early builders and users to actually have financial gain from this kind of very early days of the new Internet of Value is just so empowering. I mean, yeah, thinking back to the people who built the internet, like how things would have been different if they had kind of that connection. Um, so okay, so but this is kind of all assuming and talking about that right now. The infrastructure layer is what's being built, and I think what kind of the kind of what's been laid out in the last few years or decade plus of blockchain tech. But right now, both Preeti and Jalak, in your intros, you alluded to now seeing this new phase of blockchain technology where it will be more a consumer centric and focused, and where we'll see kind of the new consumer facing applications being built. I'm wondering kind of where specifically what sectors do you see thriving in this new kind of golden era of crypto? Like what are kind of some of the consumer trends that you're seeing? I think, well, maybe kind of DeFi is the most like the most obvious one, but curious to see your thoughts, hear your thoughts on if there's like maybe other sectors, or if you think kind of will DeFi continue to take the lead in the consumer facing blockchain applications? Kind of what are your thoughts there? And yeah, whoever wants to go for it first.
I think we saw it with, I mean, just recently with NFTs, right? And that, to me, reached, was the first time that I saw this technology, reach a broader range of people who hadn't even asked about Bitcoin back in 2017, when it seemed like everybody, including my hairdresser and my taxi driver in New York, were asking about Bitcoin. But the conversation around NFTs, because it was so relatable to people and creators too, right? Because a lot of this is the technology can be really can benefit creators and the individuals, and that's, to me, what the ultimate promise here is. It's not for corporates. It's actually empowering the individuals all over the world to credential themselves, to be able to pay and participate in economies and do it all in a seamless, low-cost way. And I felt like NFTs were the first time that we were able to see that on a broader scale. Now, I think DeFi is still very clunky. I wouldn't say it's, leading consumer applications. Yeah, I think that's going to change over the next couple of years. And I'm very excited about what that's going to mean for that individual, because I think we have really smart people working on that, and folks who are really good on the user interface side. I mean, I think Preeti has always been, very forward thinking on, how can users interact with this technology. So I think there are more and more smart minds thinking about that, where the technology is just fades away. And right now it's at the forefront of, you have to go open a wallet, you have to write down your seed phrase, you have to go through, and the average person does not have time for all this. They may be interested in it, but they're working 3 jobs, and they're, and so we really need to cross that, chasm. And that is starting to happen with the amount of talent that's coming into this space, and the people working on, because I think that user interface problem is actually, just as challenging as scaling the technology on the back end.
Yeah, and I think to kind of expand on that, like what typically happens with crypto or most technology is like, it's not like, we spend the first 10 years building all the infrastructure and then the next 10 years building all the UX. It typically goes in cycles. So there'll be some infrastructure built, and then people will try to build actually applications on top of that. And then we'll realize what the challenges that exist with the infrastructure. So developers will go back to building more infrastructure, and then we'll like, okay, now I think it's ready. So we start building applications. And then we start realizing the limitations of the infrastructure we built, and we go back to building infrastructure. So I've just seen it go in cycles. And I think I definitely noticed that the last couple of years were very infrastructure heavy, and I think we're going to enter into that next UX heavy phase, and then we'll go back into building more infrastructure. I still I know there's tons of people that have worked on wallets, but like to Jellic's point, I still think wallets. I don't know why we can't figure that out. We still don't have easy onboarding for people to get into crypto and have these crypto wallets. It's still pretty hard. So I think that's the first entry point, right? For anyone into crypto, it's you can't do anything in crypto without a wallet, and we don't have a truly seamless experience yet. That is that people are used to with one-click onboarding type of thing. And beyond that, I think, with NFTs, to Jellic's point, I think I think what NFTs did really was make crypto more understand, a single use case of crypto became understandable to the mainstream audience. I don't think they've solved a lot of the UX challenges either. So I think we'll see a lot of innovation in the UX for NFTs as well. So I think time will tell. It's really hard to predict what entrepreneurs are going to do. At least I don't think I'm a good predictor of those things. It's more just that you start to, as you meet more and more entrepreneurs, you start to see them solving problems, and you're like, oh, okay, that's a good problem to solve.
I think so. On the NFT side, I definitely agree with what both of you have to say there. We've started to see some interesting activity there. An example is the Italian music rights system. CI deployed 4.5 million NFTs for 100,000 artists onto Algorand about a month ago. And they're going to be transacting about $1 billion a year in royalties. And the problem they had, and the reason I'm raising this example is I think it's one where you start to just by nature get end user engagement, but you also have kind of new ways of transacting financially that I think are pretty interesting. One of the problems they have is that there's not a lot of transparency in that system. Artists always think that they should be getting paid more than they are, and now most of the revenue is coming from Spotify and Apple Music, which they can see what their track listens are transparently in the end if there's a way to get that data. But the other part is financially, there's a handful of very big name artists that can monetize their assets very easily. There's many more artists that are just getting started or don't have the same value built up in their music or art, and still want access to financial tools to help grow their business. And so by putting this out and making it a blockchain application, now we're seeing interesting apps like Opulus is one that has borrowing and lending and the sale of fractional rights for artists. So now they have new ways of monetizing their resources and getting the money they need to go, make more music and grow their communities. And so I think that, the other part of that is, these are very international communities, different countries with fan bases in different parts of the world that can now all sort of participate in what they're doing. So to me, it's, that's sort of one example, but I think it's the green shoots of, both sort of new business models and new ways to use the technology that, are taking advantage of some of the things that are capturing people's imagination. So we're excited to see where that goes. I agree with you, Preeti, that we have no idea how people will take advantage of the tech. So it'll be fun to see, but I'm excited that now we're seeing applications that are bringing, kind of real value, real users that have interesting assets. And I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that going forward.
So interesting. I want to start wrapping up by talking about the panel that came before us with Balaji and Mayor Francis Suarez. I think this idea of Miami coin and just city specific coins, and was wondering if maybe, what are your thoughts? Do you think something like this could be a way of onboarding just a mass crypto audience? Just maybe cities adopting their own coins, or maybe even something like Facebook with its Libra, or just major corporations being the gateway, or major cities being the gateway into crypto.
Yeah, I think city coins, creator coins, all of these things, they're going to happen. It's the question is when. And I'm trying to figure out, is now the right time for something like city coins, for example, a place like Miami to exist because the mayor is very crypto forward? Or is it still too early? I think it's going to happen. I think it just makes so much sense when you think about it. It's citizens get to sort of bet on cities that they believe in, and then the city gets to reap the rewards of building a city that people are happy about and want to bet on and put their money behind. So I think it makes a lot of sense. The question, like I said, is timing, and I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah, I think about like if you look at what India did many years ago, I think it was over 10 years ago, and I was involved a bit when I was at Omidyar, it was with Aadhaar, their individual digital wallets. They put every citizen on a biometric digital platform, and you know, there are a lot of naysayers in the beginning who said you cannot get, you know, over 1 billion people on this platform, and in a society that is, you know, kind of very independent, and what happened is they started offering, you know, their digital the payments out to rural workers, et cetera. So they were able to get their payments in a more efficient way, and so people lined up to sign up, and it was it kind of just took off. Now, if you were to take that to, and there's a lot of problems with that system too, because it's centralized, there have been hacks, and, you know, but if you take that concept of, if you can get, again, back to wallets, if you can get every citizen a digital wallet, and then with the crypto element, if you can actually, you know, offer them benefits beyond just being paid, right? But having ownership and really thinking about investable assets in a city and participating in a city, I think those are going to make for you know, much stronger cities. There was actually, before I moved to Miami, I lived in New York, and there was actually a local congressman who had mentioned that concept before COVID and had put it forth in the New York Congress about a local community-based coin. But I think the concept is still a little bit out there for a lot of jurisdictions. I think we're lucky in Miami that we do have forward-thinking politicians here. And if I, you know, look at it, this would be the perfect place to do it. And so I hope to see it happen, you know, within the next couple of years.
Yeah, is this something Algorand could support?
Well, we actually have a community. So I think community coins are really interesting. Brixton, which is an area in the UK, has the Brixton Pound. So that's a community coin that's launched on Algorand, or is in the process of it. And, you know, we're definitely seeing interest. I think there is a broader question of how you onboard sort of lots of users, and whether, you know, one application might actually be a gateway for the people to transact more. You know, another example is last week, Colombia launched their vaccine passport program on Algorand. You know, so now, you know, many of their citizens are going to be participants in the blockchain. You know, and that's in partnership with the Vivienda, which is their largest bank. You know, so I think that there's probably going to be opportunities to then, in turn, you know, have people actually transact financially once they're sort of onboarded into the network. So I think there's a lot of interesting prospects, both in community coins and in just sort of broader, you know, user onboarding. There's a lot of work to be done though in those areas. So it'll be interesting to see how it fleshes out over the next years.
That's an interesting panel. We could keep chatting forever. Community coins, consumer age of crypto, different kind of UX UI challenges, developer challenges, but obviously kind of the certainty, I think, in all of us in the panel that all of these challenges will be overcome, and there will be more and more people taking advantage of this technology in the future. So yeah, thanks everyone. I realized I didn't introduce myself starting out. So I'm the founder of the Defiant, and if you want to keep up to date with DeFi, subscribe to the newsletter. We have a YouTube channel, podcast, etc. But anyways, thank you to the wonderful panelists, and thank you to the city of Miami for hosting us. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for hosting us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in. Good afternoon, everyone. What a tremendous panel that we just had. We are so excited now to start our next panel. And we're very fortunate that we have none other than our dear friend, Laura Gaviria Halaby of SoftBank. And the next panel discussion is Crypto in the 305 with Austin Bunson and Anthony Pompliano. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Saif, and thank you, Mayor Suarez, for putting together this amazing event. I'm super, super excited to have with me Austin Bunson, founder of QuickNode, Miami OG that many of us know from years ago, who actually launched in the early days SuperConf, the Miami Tech Week, and amazing other things. But today, in addition, he's part of the SoftBank Opportunity Fund portfolio and our first investment in Miami. So super excited. And our friend Anthony Pompliano, or Pomp, an amazing entrepreneur and investor who has run product and growth teams in Facebook and manages a portfolio value of more than 500 million in early stage 10 companies. I think all of us know him from Twitter as well and from his newsletter. But we wanted to give you with this panel a hybrid perspective of what founders and funders in the crypto space have experienced in Miami over the short term and the long term, and how both of them are making the crypto space more exciting by building and funding companies out of the 305. So thank you guys for being here with me. Let's start with you, Pomp. You are super well known and one of the most thoughtful and informative minds of all things Bitcoin and crypto. But how did you first get involved with crypto and Bitcoin, and what attracts you to this space?
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I started out with mining actually Ethereum or Ether back in 2016. And it was just one of many things I was doing. I was doing a lot of early stage investing, and then there was the mining business. But in 2017, when I saw kind of just everything go up, it caught my attention. I started paying more attention, trying to understand, what is this? Why is it going up in price so rapidly? And kind of what's the substance behind it? And so that led me on this journey down the rabbit hole. And here we are. And the very first crypto company that I invested in Miami was Austin and the QuickNode guys. So super excited to be here and kind of keep funding companies in Miami.
Excellent. What about you, Austin? How did you start in the crypto space?
I went to a meetup in 2011. That was like my first brush with it. A friend of mine named Mike, he just pulled up like a janky looking computer and he's like, "Oh, this is my Bitcoin mining rig." Didn't really think of anything of it until 2015 or so, when a friend of mine, well, actually my roommate had another friend of his live with us who was the CTO of a company down here called Bitstop. And this guy was, living with us on our couch. His name is Dynel. And he always wanted to pay me in Bitcoin. Like, he would always convert his Bitcoin to gift cards to buy pizza and stuff. Eventually I sold a TV of mine to him and my former roommate for 2.5 Bitcoin, of which I sold when it doubled, like a genius. And then after that, also in 2017, it popped up again, and that's when I really got really involved.
Excellent. And that meetup was also in Miami when you went to?
Fort Lauderdale, but yes, South Florida.
Great. Bump, why should everyone care about this space? What are those applications on top of crypto that have you most excited and that are going to be applicable to everyone?
Yeah, I usually tell people there's 3 things that you should pay attention to. The first is one of the early rules I learned in investing is just follow the talent. And I don't know an industry that has more intellectual talent flooding into it than crypto. These people are coming from traditional technology. They're coming from Wall Street. They're coming directly out of some of the best schools in the country. And so when you just have so much talent flowing into an industry, there's going to be value created. The second thing is follow the capital. And so what you're seeing is tons and tons of money, literally $1 trillion alone just in Bitcoin, about another trillion or so in all of the rest of the industry on the liquid token side. and then you've got multiple companies that are worth, billions, if not tens of billions of dollars. It's just a lot of value creation happening and capital flowing into the space. So follow the talent, follow the capital. And then lastly is most investors are looking for asymmetry. What they're looking to do is understand the downside, but also have incredible upside in their investments. Most other markets in the world, especially in the financial markets, have been commoditized. So whether it's commodities, whether it's traditional equities or other currencies, you're talking about kind of 8-10% type returns year over year. The absolute best managers or kind of asset allocators in these industries, 30-35% a year. Crypto, that is frankly bad performance, right? The asymmetry that's being captured over the last decade or so is incredible. And so I think that what you're going to find is that as more people understand the intellectual talent that's flowing in, the capital that's flowing in, and then the types of returns that can be captured, it's just inevitable. Like this is going to become one of the largest investment opportunities in the world that will attract a lot of capital, a lot of investors, and then eventually it'll get commoditized, right? And eventually we will go and trend towards kind of what we see in those traditional markets. And so just when you see something new like this, you want to be able to be early in order to be a beneficiary. And I think a lot of people in crypto have already kind of recognized that. And that's why they've decided to spend time here, and others will recognize it over time.
How do you see that talent point in Miami? Do we have the right talent currently here to continue to build these companies, or what can we do to continue building that talent that would flood into these companies?
I'm biased, so I'll call that out first. I recently moved to Miami the start of this year. And here's my general thought process. Why would you live anywhere else?
Agree.
Right? If you look at kind of the other kind of major hubs, right? I looked at Miami and I looked at Austin, Texas. Austin, I really like a lot. Incredible people, great tech scene, all that stuff. It felt a little bit like a smaller kind of town to me. And also there was no ocean, no water, kind of all of that type of stuff. LA, San Francisco, and New York, I basically put in the same bucket. Come spend a month in Miami and then go back to one of those three places. And I promise you, you will say, oh my God, the homeless population has gotten out of control. People are insane here. The city is falling apart. It's disgusting, right? Like I can't describe it until you come and spend a month in Miami and then go back to those places. That's when you really realize like how different it is. And then the last thing is when people always ask me and they say, look, why do you enjoy Miami? I say the best way I know how to articulate this now is I'm happier here. And happier, I think, has a lot of things that flow into it. But I do think that there's a huge aspect of just the sun, right? And vitamin D and being able to go outside. It really does have a kind of physiological effect. And so when you put all that together, I think it's people who are moving here. They're not just moving here because they're seeing tweets, right? They're coming here to check it out because of the tweets, but they're staying because there's actual substance kind of behind a lot of the hype. And then when you look at talent, like it just takes time. Right. And so I know the CEOs of a lot of major kind of hot Series B, Series C companies that are here. Their employees are moving. More technical talent is moving. More crypto talent is moving here. And I think it's just a trend that's not going to reverse. And so the people who, again, are early are going to be rewarded because they're going to be the ones who are able to help build the network. And as we saw with the building of Silicon Valley over kind of the last 70 years or so, that ends up being a pretty valuable position to be in.
No, absolutely. And Austin, you and I have been here for a while, and after experiences that happiness that Pump mentions with the amazing welcome culture of Miami, of the universities that are doing amazing things to bring forward all of the upskilling that is needed for this new type of companies. You launch your company QuickNote here. Why don't you share a little bit more on what QuickNote does? And why did you build it out of Miami, and how has Miami been the right place for you to launch this and to continue to build on the blockchain space?
Absolutely. Yeah. So QuickNote is a company that provides blockchain infrastructure to companies building on the blockchain. So that is, imagine PayPal. Well, not imagine, they are our customer. Imagine Atari, 0x, many different companies building on blockchain are using us. We're doing over 1 billion requests every single day. And I'd say the reason that we chose to build in Miami is just because the talent network that we have is here, right? So my co-founders and I have actually worked on multiple projects together prior to QuickNode. I helped them build a CDN, which they sold to the SSL provider Komodo. And before that, I worked with them on other projects. So it was really just a question of like, you know, where do I know people that are doing interesting things? And it just so happened that my friends are interested in the same things that I am, and they also happen to be talented and very good at, sales and business operations. And, you know, the other one is really, really good at coding. And so it was just a natural fit, right? It was just like, everyone's here, everyone loves it here already. Why would we, you know, why would I go anywhere else?
No, definitely. And Austin, you provide, as you said, blockchain infrastructure for blockchain companies. What are those types of companies and applications that you've seen being built on top of it that have you excited or that makes you excited about this space that are gonna be able to get more and more people of what's happening in blockchain in general?
I think so PayPal is definitely a really good one, right? So, you know, like, if you want to buy or sell crypto, you can use PayPal. You can also use Coinbase. Coinbase is not one of our customers, but PayPal is. You know, that's sort of like the most common thing, right? Like the simple, you know, sort of entry into blockchain/crypto. You start with buying it, but there's like some very strange and wild projects on our platform. So, you know, there's a lossless lottery. So you just buy a lottery ticket and then, you know, a day later you get your money back, but you could also potentially have won a jackpot. That sounds like a Ponzi scheme, but it's not, I promise. You know, there's another project that's not money motivated. It's, I saw it last summer. It was like a anonymous police misconduct database on Ethereum. So you can just report misconduct, upload files, etc. And it's uncensorable. So, you know, even if, you know, the federal government wanted to stop it, they couldn't necessarily block that, right? Because it's completely decentralized. So there's all sorts of crazy projects on the platform, and, you know, we're really excited to host all of them.
That's great. That's great. Bob, you also do a lot of early stage investments. You were also, again, one of the early investors of Austin, which is great. What excites you? What do you think are going to be those applications that are going to be more known for, especially for everyone, so that everybody starts understanding that this is just coming and new and exciting things are being built on top of it?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of two separate buckets I really break it into. There's the money conversation, which is Bitcoin versus fiat currencies or global stores of value. And what we have seen over the last 12 to 18 months is the virus and the monetary response to that economic chaos really revealed that what we have watched for decades now is a central bank system that has completely destroyed the wealth of the middle class and the lowest socioeconomic buckets. And so when you see that happening in real time, what you realize is the money's broken, right? That the currency itself does not work from the sense of it is pushing people further and further away from that American dream. And so as the world has woken up to that, everyone from pseudonymous accounts on Twitter all the way up to multiple of the most kind of richest people in the world are multi-billionaires, they're buying Bitcoin. And they're realizing that this global store of value is censorship resistant. It has a programmatic, transparent monetary policy, and that's going to prove to be incredibly valuable over time. The second bucket is, I describe it as like the world's going to run on decentralized open protocols. And what protocols those are, how they work, what's the sequence of which they get rolled out and adopted, all that's up for debate. I think that's what myself and many other investors and builders around the world kind of spend all day trying to figure out or influence. But I think that at this point, it's all about automation. right? And ultimately, like that is what crypto is about, is you're taking all of these assets, you're digitizing them, you're creating these open digital decentralized protocols. And then you're saying, look, we're going to automate the world. But historically, it's been nearly impossible to have any level of true automation because everything's centralized. Everything is an electronic QSIP with multiple day settlement times, right? And you just get in this really weird world where the technology was actually further along than the institutions and the legacy players. But now we're able to use new technology to basically say, look, we're not going to wait for you guys to upgrade your technology. We're just going to disrupt you. We're going to build a whole new system without you. If you want to participate, great. The door's open for you to participate. But if you want to participate, we're going to happily build the new system without you. And what you find is when you have a free market competition, usually legacy players, the good ones, the ones that will survive, they end up capitulating and participating, right? And the ones who don't end up getting disrupted. And so I think we've got to remember that, if you look at financial services as an example, Goldman Sachs been around for 100 plus years. So they've literally seen the invention of the internet, the cell phone, right? All these technologies, like they're probably going to figure it out, right? That's in the DNA of the business of being kind of adopting of new technologies when they feel like that's the right time. But there's also a lot of financial services businesses that are not going to adopt this and they're going to get disrupted. And so I think that's really kind of the way that you view the world is just, okay, we have this new global store of value that has a new piece of technology underpinning it that obviously is valuable. It's $1 trillion asset in 12 years. And then there's going to be these open decentralized protocols kind of that the world runs on. And if you're a builder or an investor, you can choose to participate or not. No one's going to wait around and wait for your participation. And so that's where you ultimately see the intelligence test, right? And I always say that every time I meet somebody who tells me that the whole space is not valuable, I just, okay, you're probably not nearly as intelligent as I thought you were. And I'll just put you in that bucket in my head and move on. I'm not going to argue with you. Sure, maybe you're right. But there's $2+ trillion of value that's been created in about a decade that speaks otherwise. And I just think that we're at a point now where it's no longer a debate as to like, is this stuff valuable? Is it here to stay? It's more so moving more towards the micro conversation of which blockchains are valuable, which are not, what assets, what applications, who's going to adopt what, where is, localization matter, or they're just kind of global protocols that are the dominant, kind of uses. It's all up for debate. And, frankly, I don't have all the answers, but I think that it's just, we're past the point of, does this actually matter and will it be here in the future?
No, absolutely. And maybe Bunsen, in some of those questions that Pomp raised, for example, what makes a blockchain valuable versus another one? Can you maybe elaborate in that debate? And I know we don't know the answers to that yet, but some of the principles and the characteristics that people should be looking at? Yeah, sure. So, as Pump mentioned, there's $2 trillion of value, right? Something that maybe isn't extremely talked about is like there's billions of dollars of loans in crypto assets. And when we see a dip, right, like we saw a dip from 60 to 36,000, not a single company needed a bailout, right? So that's a stable system, right? And so, what makes a blockchain good? Well, stability from an economic standpoint, meaning like no bailouts are required because it's actually sound, is like a pretty good quality, right? And then beyond that, like decentralization. So like how hard would it be for any central authority to take it down? Like let's say PayPal, Google, the Iranian government, whoever. And probably the last is like, how easy is it to use, right? Like how can developers use it? And so, those are the qualities that I think make for a really good experience for the user and the developer on blockchains. I keep hearing still that people sometimes continue to believe that blockchains are not secure. How would you answer to these people that the security behind these blockchains? Maybe both of you from your different perspectives.
Pomp, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's there's billions of dollars being waged on scaling and all this stuff. I do think that there's one key piece that become more confident in sharing with folks, which is, I think previously there was a debate specifically around scaling on layer 1 versus layer 2. And various blockchains thought that there could be, oh, you can only scale on layer 2 or you can only scale on layer 1. I think generally, and this is a little bit of a generalization, but most people have now agreed, okay, the scaling is going to happen at the layer 2. And you're going to get all sorts of things that are going to, be interoperable or not, various ways of doing that scaling on the layer 2, but it's just not going to happen on layer 1. And so when you see, if you want any level of decentralization, and so I think that part of what makes this so much fun also is that there's unlikely to be one single winner also, right? This is a world where you're going to get multiple winners, let's say in terms of how do you scale. And just, take the Bitcoin blockchain as an example. There's multiple things that are happening there, from Lightning to RSK to Sovereign to Stacks, all these different kind of attempts. But that doesn't mean that one person wins and everyone else loses. And so when you have a positive sum game of multiple winners, I think that really is enticing from an investor standpoint, because then it just comes down to, okay, who do you believe in most and where do you think is the best risk reward? And that's where you go and you allocate capital. And also, what do you think?
I agree with everything you said, but in terms of the security of the blockchain, right? So, the only plausible argument that I have for major chains like Bitcoin or Ethereum right now is that only quantum computing could potentially unseat the security, right? Like it's based on very proven methods that are well proved and used pretty much everywhere that you use the internet. So if blockchain is insecure, then your internet connection is insecure.
Which a lot of people would say that it isn't, right? So, but I think what you said is it's also that we've seen this ups and downs coming, and the system has not broken, right? And this has been going on, especially in Bitcoin and Ethereum for many years, and we haven't had an issue of this sort. So more and more people would need to start trusting, right, that the security of the system to feel more comfortable with what's happening on top of it. So actually, both of you started to get into the space by mining. If someone wants to start today to get into the space, where would you recommend them to start exploring? I don't think, most likely mining would not be the recommendation at this point in time, but then what would it be like if you were starting today? Like how would you recommend someone to start playing in the space and getting involved?
I'll go first. So depending on your angle, so if you know nothing, there's some great people to follow on Twitter. One of them is named Anthony Pompliano. He's tweeting out educational content all the time. Beyond that, a person on the panel right before ours, Preeti Kasireddy, she has a free course that you can take online. So highly recommend that. If you're a developer, you should absolutely check out quicknode.com. We have excellent guides to help you understand what it means to build on blockchain. And then, just generally following people on Twitter is a great way to start.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is go get your hands dirty. So go buy a little bit of Bitcoin, even if it's literally $5. Go, send it to somebody, send it to another wallet, receive it from a wallet. Go and play with the decentralized protocols. Just doing, I think, is a great way to learn as well. And so, between those two things of Austin, of go follow people, go listen and consume content, and kind of find the folks that you can learn from, and then two, just getting your hands dirty. I think most people can get up to speed pretty quickly.
Yeah, I remember when I bought my first Bitcoin back, like in 2014. That's how I started, right? Like sending it to someone, like freaking out on what was going to happen. But it's a good way to start with some of these things and opening up some of the wallets and stuff along those lines. Let's go more into the government side. So we see, and actually all of this conference is hosted by Mayor Suarez, who has been an amazing promoter of the space. But how do you see the rest of the world and other governments and other cities embracing crypto, and why should they care and get into the game?
Austin?
Yeah, so I'll start with like the tech side, right? So, Ethereum and any Ethereum virtual machine based chain is a general computation network. So that means you can write pretty much any sort of program, right? So like, let's say that, we wanted to audit every visit to the mayor's office. You could put that on the blockchain and it would be available for anyone to use 24/7 without anyone's permission. Same thing for, police misconduct, same thing for parking tickets, right? And like, identity could potentially be powered by the blockchain, right? I think Pomp has some very specific opinions around like cities putting Bitcoin in their treasury. So I'll let him speak a little bit more to that.
I think that cities, individuals, corporations, and central banks are all actually the exact same. They have to protect their purchasing power, and they have to do what is in the best interest of their stakeholders. And so we saw individuals wake up to this first. We then saw corporations wake up to it. I think that we are now starting to see a lot of other types of organizations, financial institutions, etc. I think cities fall in that second kind of bucket of organizations or corporations. And then eventually the third bucket we're going to see is we're going to see central banks. We're going to see the actual countries themselves do this. But what's the difference between a central bank, a city, kind of balance sheet, and a corporation's balance sheet? Nothing, right? They have to preserve purchasing power. They have to preserve the value. They have to look after the stakeholders. And so again, with Bitcoin specifically and putting it on a balance sheet, if you continue to put dollars on your balance sheet and you continue to allow those dollars to be the majority of your kind of wealth or value, you are going to be guaranteed to lose money over time, right? And we can argue all we want about what is inflation, what is it, kind of the future look like, all this stuff. It does not matter. You are guaranteed to lose value. And I think people are waking up to that because when it's at, 1%, 1.5% doesn't seem that bad. When it starts to creep up higher, people say, wait a second, hold on. And so I think that ultimately there's this very weird world where the dollar, the euro, the yen, the won, etc. These are highly fractionalized ecosystems. Wouldn't it make sense to have one global currency? Why do we have so many different ones? It's all about control. But when you all of a sudden create one single global currency that everyone can use, everyone accepts, it's able to be used without permission from anyone else, it seems to make a lot of sense. And then you add in the monetary policy that will guarantee that you will preserve your purchasing power because of the finite actual amount. I think it becomes overwhelmingly obvious that this is just a matter of time until this continues to ascend and eventually becomes a global reserve currency. So the states, the cities, the municipalities that choose to be early to this, they're just going to benefit more so than the people who choose to be late. But eventually they all will do it. It's just a matter of time. And so I think that the city of Miami looking at this, again, they haven't made any decisions. They're just simply studying it. Puts them at the forefront of innovation. They're saying to themselves, we want to be a leader. And in order to be a leader, you need to be informed. You need to be educated. And the only way that we can be educated and informed on this topic is we got to go study it. We got to go do the work. And so it's kudos to Mayor Suarez and the rest of kind of the staff and management of the city. But I think it's the right move, and we'll see what happens. But I think they're way, way, way further ahead than most other cities or states around the country.
Is there another city or country around the world that is leading the way on how they're approaching the space?
No. No, look, I think that there are some countries, right, that have been very kind of embracing of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and some of these technologies. But within the United States, there's basically three buckets, I think. that people fall into. One is some sort of tax treatment, right? So if you look at from a tax perspective, maybe take a state like Kentucky. Kentucky has done a number of things to the tax code that should incentivize miners, for example, to come and use power that is generated in Kentucky to mine cryptocurrency. You therefore get preferential tax treatment. Okay, that's interesting. The second is around regulation. So there are some states like Wyoming who have created incredible regulatory kind of frameworks for crypto companies, which is in stark contrast to a place like New York City, where I came from, that literally in many ways discriminate against crypto companies, right? They actually require more regulation. They require more adherence, more types of licenses, et cetera, to actually operate those businesses within their borders. And then the third bucket after taxes and kind of regulation is just simply what I just call like the psychological component of it. And so right now, if you go around the country and you ask people what city is most kind of accepting of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, I think resoundingly, you're going to get two answers. One, I don't know, right? Because it's just early. Or two is the city of Miami. And so from a psychological standpoint, there's a great importance of sticking a flag in the ground and saying, we are open for business, right? We want innovators. We want technologists. We want capital providers to come to our city, and we want them to do what they do. We're not here as a government to be your boss. We're not here to be the ones to tell you how to do your job. No, in fact, our body of work is the exact opposite. Tell us what you need. We're going to do everything we possibly can within our power to give it to you or give you access to it. Then we're going to get the hell out of your way. And I think that ultimately America as a country was built on entrepreneurship, on innovators, on scientists, on problem solvers. And the city of Miami is going back to the roots of America and saying, listen, if you're a problem solver, if you're an innovator, come here. We will do everything in our power to make you have access to the things you need. And then we'll get out of the way and let you do what you need to do. And I think in today's environment, that's a really, really compelling message, because there's a lot of cities and states around the country, they feel the exact opposite. And people are choosing to move. And, the data speaks for itself. There are literally other cities and states around the country that are losing residents, and Miami is gaining residents. I think the incentive system is working.
Austin, you're an entrepreneur here. Like, how have you felt that?
Yeah, I mean, the mayor's work has been extremely beneficial to my company. He's been on this mission for at least half a decade, though. But having Pomp move down here was like, I once I found that out, because the mayor courted him, I emailed him and I asked him if he wanted to eat pizza, which turned into him investing in my company after meeting me and my co-founders. So we felt it, and the people that are coming down here and want to integrate, want to meet the local entrepreneurs, that they're awesome, right? And yeah.
So Austin, what would you say to, let's say, a company that is thinking of opening headquarters in the US, choosing between New York, let's say Miami or California, in order to build a crypto company? Like, why choose Miami? I know we talked about a lot of these topics, but like, how would you summarize some of the reasons for them to make that choice?
Yeah, I think if you're a crypto company and you're opening an office in the US, there's really only two choices. There's Miami, probably the better choice, and then somewhere in Wyoming. And when you put it that way, is there really a place in Wyoming, or is there only Miami? Miami is in the state of Florida, which has no state income tax, so you get that benefit. There's already a bunch of crypto companies here, a bunch of crypto people here, like Pomp, that can amplify your company if you can, meet the right people and make the right connections. And then beyond that, right? Like, not a lot of people know this, but Ethereum was actually announced at the Miami Bitcoin conference. So Miami has a pretty strong history in crypto, and I think that people will probably be compelled to continue moving here if they're starting crypto companies.
Awesome. Pomp, like, what do you think it's missing, or what can we help in order to make even Miami more compelling for that argument that all of these companies should be built out of here?
I think
Hey, everybody, I did the tech check for Chamath this morning, so he should be.
I think that the biggest thing ends up being success cures most of the problems. And so the most important thing to happen in Miami is just to build massive businesses. It shuts up all the haters. It serves as the greatest magnet to attract more capital, more talent, etc. And it ultimately makes the entrepreneurs and investors in those businesses so damn wealthy that they have nothing better to do than to literally take the money and reinvest it back into the community, whether it's investing in startups, whether it's paying more in taxes, whether it's building out real estate, whether it's doing all these different types of things. And so this isn't a recreation of a new playbook, right? Or a creation of a new playbook. Like, we can just go and look at what worked. Go look at Silicon Valley. What happened? They built massive businesses that were super successful. That led to the investors and entrepreneurs being wealthy. They then funded the next wave of companies. Those companies became massively successful. And you end up building this huge thing. And so you get a flywheel going with capital, you get a flywheel going with knowledge. And what happens is very, very quickly, you go from very little density and almost no track record of success, or kind of outlier successes, to now it just becomes table stakes. Of course, people are going to build successful businesses there. Look at all the ones that came before them. And so that's all I'm focused on right now. Everything else, there's people who are way better at it than me. The thing that I think I'm uniquely positioned to do is to work with founders and to build highly successful businesses that call Miami home. If that happens, everything else will be solved for, right? Because ultimately the momentum, the talent, the capital will kind of take over, and the fight will have started.
No, absolutely. We are in the process of wrapping up, but Austin, like, what are your closing thoughts on encouraging everyone to come and build in Miami?
Yeah, so you should definitely come and build in Miami because there's no state income tax. There's great weather for at least 7 months out of the year. There's a low cost of living. There's now literally hundreds or thousands of highly qualified professional talent from Silicon Valley and New York living here, on top of the 50,000+ technology professionals that have already lived in Miami for the last decade plus. There's a thriving ecosystem, and there's lots of great restaurants, great art, and just an amazing quality of life generally.
Oh, perfect. And I think to everyone, reach out to the folks that Austin and especially to Pomp and him on Twitter. And the community is really open, and just make sure that you didn't miss the way Pomp ended up investing in Austin was literally just reaching out in Twitter, inviting Pomp for pizza. So that's how the community is in Miami. People keep being a little bit skeptic on how open it is and how collaborative, but it is a fact that that's how it works, and that's why so many things are being built in Miami, not only for the US but for the world out of here. So really excited, both Pomp and Austin, to have moderated this panel with you. Thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing for the city. And looking forward to continue building Miami for the world together.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
What an extraordinary panel. We are so fortunate to have had the insight of Laura, Austin, and Pomp. And with that, we are in the final lap of Mayor Suarez's crypto conference. And so without further ado, it brings me great joy in welcoming up Mayor Francis Suarez and his guest for Fireside Chat, Chamath. Over to you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Saif. Chamath has become a friend. He's someone who I very much admire. I've gotten a chance to spend a lot of time with him, both virtually and in person. He is one of these people that is going to help redefine the way the world operates, and is invested in companies that change how we do things, how we feel. And what's interesting about him is, and I'll give you a little insight and let him sort of introduce himself. He's someone that really, really cares about creating a fair world the right way, and finding companies that are for-profit companies for social impact that are going to help create more equity and more fairness in our world. So without further ado, Chamath, I want to thank you for doing this on such short notice. Thank you for our friendship. And I don't know if you want to just maybe say a few words to sort of kick things off, and then we'll get into this.
Well, first, Francis, I just want to say thank you for including me. It's really been a pleasure to get to know you. I think what you're doing is incredible, and I'm just lucky to be around incredible people, you included. Well, the short story of myself, and it's actually your story and other people's story, is just one of hardworking parents, immigrants who came to this country to try to kind of make a better life. In my case, it was to Canada, but now I'm in the United States now longer than I've been in any other country. I've been a citizen of 3 countries, which is crazy. And yeah, I have been the byproduct of 2 trends that sometimes seem like they're in conflict today more than ever. One was a social safety net. So growing up in Canada, I had access to healthcare and I had access to education. And then being in the United States, I was able to really benefit from entrepreneurialism and access to capital. And I see the value in these companies that can build for the future. And so, I would love to find a state of the world that can balance these 2 things, that creates what I call an even starting line for folks. Nobody wants to have the same finish line. That's not fun. But a starting line that's even for everybody is really interesting, and it'll allow all of us to sort of, do the best that we all can. So that's sort of what motivates me and drives me.
So thinking of so many things as you were speaking. The first is maybe giving people a little insight into how we met. I won't give them all the gory details because it started with a tweet, which I will not replay, but you and I both know what the tweet said. And I just reached out to you through direct message, and you were kind enough to share your number. And, what I found so refreshing about you was, when we first met on Zoom, actually, you basically said, like, what's your story? What are you about? Who are you? What's this about? I mean, I hear all these things, but tell me how your family got here, how you, succeeded. And, we connected immediately because it was a similar immigrant story. My father was a product of, 14 kids, a family that came to Cuba with nothing. God was blessed enough to get a full scholarship to high school, full scholarship to college, 2 graduate degrees from Harvard, has written, 8 books and speaks like 4 or 5 languages, and then came to Miami and became the first Cuban mayor of Miami. And then, and my mother, the same, came at 6 years old, and had to, raise a family of 4 and so, and I am very blessed to live in this country. But as you have just said, the challenges of this country, even though it's the greatest country on the planet, are really the challenges of our generation. And I think people, unfortunately, are falling into a lot of traps when it comes to how you solve those challenges. And I think what's so refreshing about you is you blow up the box. Forget about thinking outside of the box. You blow the box up, and you think, in terms that no one else is thinking. And I think, talk to us a little bit about some of the companies that you've been involved in that you think can paradigm shift and help create more equality of opportunity as opposed to equality of outcome, which is what, like you said, we don't want as a society. We know that doesn't work.
I'll give you a couple of examples of companies, but just to build on what you're saying as a precursor to it, you're really right. We're at this interesting point in America's history where there's so much frustration because people don't believe that the American dream actually exists anymore. And there are way too many people who think that 10 years from now, their life is going to be worse than it is today. And their kids' lives, to the extent that they have them, will be even worse than that. And that's what we have to fix. So the question is how? Well, there's no like panacea. There's no pill that you can take. There's no one single thing. So you have to, I think, invest the time in solutions that can actually kind of, at the edges, make things a little bit fairer for everybody. So I'll give you a couple of examples of things that I think are really compelling. 7 years ago, I met these two young guys. One was from SpaceX and one was from Blue Origin. And, they had this crazy idea, which is they said, we want to build a rocket using a 3D printer. And instantly I was like, well, this is a crazy idea, because if you can imagine just the actual physics of a rocket is incredibly complicated. The pressures, the tensile strengths, all the stuff that's required to make it work. It's hard enough to do it by hand. So the idea that you're going to create a printer that can make this thing and print it in these, next generation materials seemed ludicrous. Now you would say, well, that just seems like a stupid science fair project. Why does it matter? Well, so fast forward, this is now the second most valuable private space company after SpaceX. We were there from the beginning. But what are they doing that's really valuable? They're going to allow anybody, big companies or small companies, to build and print things on demand, just like taking out a phone and ordering something from Amazon. Now, why is that important? Well, it starts to expand the number of people that can be entrepreneurs. It starts to expand the quality of the products that Americans can build. And all of a sudden, you can start to put two and two together and see an economy that is just a little bit better off, a little bit more even than it is today. And so those are the kinds of things that really give me energy. I'll give you another quick example. There were these guys inside of Google who had built a chip at one point for Google to basically accelerate all their efforts in AI. And I'd heard about this years ago, and I became infatuated. I became obsessed with this thing. And it was called the TPU, Tensor Processing Unit, kind of like a CPU, but for machine learning. And we found the guys, and I found the guy. And I was like, you need to leave Google and we need to make this into a company. And the reason was because it's really important that every company have access to that kind of compute power so that AI can be pervasively available, right? So whether it's Tesla, who's able to put their chips for machine learning inside of a car, or Ford or Volvo or whatever, or whether it's a data center like Amazon that can use it, or Microsoft for every one of their cloud customers, it doesn't matter. Anyways, 7 years later, this thing is kind of working. And it's going to even the starting line so that there's no one company that can monopolize ownership of AI, right? The downstream effects of all these things over time, I think, will compound. But those are like two examples of businesses that, we've been there since day one. It was hard. There was like a lot of like moments where it just like looks like nothing is working, which is kind of, the battle of entrepreneurship. Sure. And then 7-8 years later, you kind of look like a genius, but it wasn't like that the way there.
It's funny because that's sort of how we got to this moment in Miami. People, they don't realize it's like a slow build. It took 10 years. And then we went from, startup to IPO almost like overnight, which is incredible. For me, when I think about how do we create an ecosystem that delivers on that promise that you're talking about of making things just a little bit easier, I start thinking about a few fundamental principles. The first, and why I spend so much time on this, because sometimes people say, and they criticize me, and it's listen, this is politics, right? You're going to be criticized for things. Why does the mayor spend so much time on this? And the reason why I spend so much time on it, first and foremost, is I spent my 11 years of my career focusing what I call the expense side of the equation, building affordable housing, building, transportation that's more efficient, less expensive, more effective. And that's all wonderful. That's great. It helps people that are struggling, live with more dignity or get around and have an easier way to get to their jobs. But as I thought to myself, what am I really doing? I mean, I'm kind of giving them a fish as opposed to teaching them how to fish, right? As opposed to creating the kind of economy, which, by the way, I know is the economy that's coming regardless, whether we like technology, whether we don't like technology. You and I have talked a lot about sort of the partisan nature of our world and whether that's constructive or destructive, and how that formulates into politics, that formulates into policy, that creates either advantages or disadvantages for people. But I'm thinking to myself, now I'm finally in a place where I know that every job that's created in my city doesn't just affect that person. It affects their spouse. It affects their children or whatever children they may have. It affects those, they're going to get a better education. It's going to affect their children's children. So it is a generational impact by creating one job. And when you juxtapose what are we doing as a city compared to what other cities are doing that are pushing out their innovators, pushing out their creators, or taxing them to death. We have a little program, and I say little because we spent $750,000 through the Downtown Development Authority, and I want to commend, the executive director, Christina Crespi. I want to thank Kevin Rees, and I want to thank Manolo Reyes, who's the chair. With $750,000, we had a program where we don't not only do we not push people out, we're inviting people in. We're giving them $50,000. This is crazy. A year for 3 years, nothing, almost nothing. It's a gesture, right? And with that gesture, we've created 1,400 jobs in 1 year with an average salary of $130,000. Think about the return on investment for $750,000. I mean, but it goes to attitude. It goes to wanting to desire a place that embraces this innovation economy that we know we're getting into. And I think what's exciting for me is precisely what you're talking about, which is that this innovation economy should not be a stratifier. On the contrary, it should be something that democratizes investment opportunity, democratizes technology and the ubiquity of technology for people at a low price. And so that's what it means to me. How do you see this Miami moment and sort of how crypto, to talk a little bit about crypto since we're in this moment, how crypto can decentralize financial assets, financial opportunities as well. But let's talk first about Miami and then talk about crypto.
Well, I think Miami is an unbelievable example of what to do. And you were proving before all of this stuff happened that what you really need are like people who have what I call mastery. So, when you look at people who actually get anything done, underneath the covers is not that they're richer, it's not that they're smarter, it's not that they went to one school over another, it's that they all have mastery in that thing, right? And I think what you took the time to do, and your colleagues, was actually think through these things. You didn't come with an agenda. It didn't seem to me as I got to know you that you had these biases. In fact, you have a characteristic which I really admire. I like to say that I try to have it as much as possible, which is strong opinions weakly held, which means that you can re-underwrite with data. You'll change your mind based on what you're learning. That is the path to mastery. And so you were able to do things that in other cities, let me give you an example of the city closest to me, which is San Francisco, where there were some enormous missteps. And if you look under the cover, they replaced searching for mastery with basically, ideology. And they were like, well, this is what you need to be if you're meant to be progressive or woke or this or that. And they got caught up in labels. They cared more about decarceration versus something else, because to be law and order meant, you couldn't actually have both things. Again, people were creating artificial boundary conditions. And what Miami did in a moment where all of a sudden you were free to live wherever you could, I actually don't think people came for the taxes. I mean, I think it's a nice benefit. But most people, I don't think, let the tax tail wag the dog. Rather, they want to be in a place where philosophically they're like, these people are smart. You want to be around smart people. And I think that's what you did right. I think you were able to demonstrate humility, availability. I mean, you're the only politician. Listen, I am a top 10 donor to the DNC or to the Democrats, okay? Top 10, millions of dollars leave my pocketbook. Not a single politician has ever reached out to me on Twitter other than you. That makes them stuck in a way of thinking, and that makes you nimble. And you did that to Keith Raboy, you did that to me, you did that to David Sachs, you did this to a whole bunch of people across a political spectrum, and you built a base of support where we all donated, where you have Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians. I mean, I'm a centrist. I'm not really a label of anything. But the point is, you did that. And I think that's emblematic of why Miami is having its moment. You have a chance to demonstrate mastery. And then if you follow through with continually good policies, there's going to be a sucking sound from all of the great cities, because that intellectual capital wants to be around like-minded people. And we are so frustrated with inept political infrastructure. That's probably the best way to talk about crypto. Like, basically, if you have mastery in my job, what I do and what the greats of my industry have done is they have proven that they are great capital allocators, right? They know where to allocate capital to create the kind of positive change in the world that they want, however they deem that. Politicians who are incredible do the same thing. They take these massive, massive budgets and they're able to allocate them in ways that change how the world works. The problem is, if you look inside of finance in general, you have had trillions of dollars of value creation in a way that has unfortunately locked a lot of people out. It has created a bunch of insiders versus outsiders, and it's created a very brittle way that isn't very even for people. Like, ask somebody how hard it is to get a credit card or a loan or a mortgage or access to capital to grow their business. It is still incredibly hard. And so what crypto did was basically said, we don't need to live by those rules. We can agree by a completely different set of standards that are optimized for transparency, optimized for actual value, right? Like, if you can demonstrate to me that you're worthy of credit or this or that, I'll just use a computer to get to the answer, not my eyes or my, whatever biases I have in my brain. It's such a powerful unlocking of value. So to me, like, what's so beautiful is crypto started, look, I was there very early in Bitcoin. It started out for me as a capital allocator, as a hedge against politicians who were badly misallocating capital. Because I thought, if we keep printing trillions of dollars, we're going to debase the US dollar. And I initially called it gold 2.0. And I said it was schmuck insurance. It's still largely that, I think. But still, Bitcoin is very important. But then what has happened is this entire industry has flourished behind it. And it, over time, will be many, many orders of magnitude bigger than Bitcoin itself. And what it will represent, Francis, is a complete democratization of right now what is a highly entrenched set of insiders who run $1 trillion cartel.
So I have three things that I wrote down as you were speaking that I wanted to touch. We don't talk enough in this society, and you talked about it, and it really affected me when you said it. First of all, we don't talk enough about labels. We really got to get away from labels. It is a very simplistic way of putting somebody in a box, oftentimes to dehumanize them, and oftentimes to criticize them in a dehumanizing way. And I think, forget about the Republican, Democrat, or whatever. I just think labels, there's so many of them, and it's a shortcut, right? And it's a shortcut to say, hey, you must be, because you are this, you must be this, or whatever. And so therefore I can do this. And, I think as a society, we have to have a larger conversation about that. Unfortunately, we only have you for 30 minutes, but you and I could probably talk about this for hours. The second one was, this morning, I was taking my son to school. I know you have a few children as well. I was taking my son to school, and we have a ritual where we listen to music, and, we play music, and he usually DJs, whatever. And we were listening today. He kind of said, Dad, pick your favorite song. So I picked 3 songs, but one of the ones that I picked, and one day you should hear it and translate, because it's in Spanish. It's called Patria y Vida. Patria y Vida. So the communists in Cuba used to say patria o muerte. In other words, either my country or death.
Yeah.
And these artists just created a song that will say, no, the country and life, we have to live, we have to fight against this. And it goes to your point about people valuing freedom as opposed to a tax regime per se, right? Making the decision. And I was listening to a song, I got emotional, you know? I'm getting emotional right now thinking about it. And my son tells me, Daddy, why are you crying? And I said, because we live in a free country. We live in a country of liberty. And, you know, it's emotional because we take it for granted. We go about our daily life and we just don't really realize, I think, what we have. And when it's been taken from you and the suffering that comes along with that and the misery that comes along with it, not just the physical misery, but the loss of hope, which I think is in some ways is probably the most punishing thing that you can do for somebody. If you think about prison, it's a loss of hope, right? Because you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, you can't create anything, you have no hope. And the last thing that I wanted to say based on what you said, and then hear your reflections, is when you think about blockchain and tokenizing, for example, financial instruments, right? And you think about something that you said, which is if somebody wants to buy a building right now, or build a building, right? It essentially gets built through two confluences of capital, equity and debt. That's it. Debt comes from a bank. Unless you're a shareholder in the bank or you work for the bank, you're not going to benefit from that, right? And you're not getting any interest. So you're not benefiting as a depositor, right? I mean, no offense to my bank friends, it's the truth, right? And then if you're on the equity side of building a building, you're not going to get on the equity side unless you're a very wealthy person. I mean, it's just not going to happen. There's no way, there's no mechanism. Yeah. But now what is being talked about is tokenizing these equity investments so that somebody who wants to put $100 or $250 or $1,000 into an investment can get 20% returns, 12% returns, 15% returns. Even some of these, crypto, exchanges. If you're in a stable coin, a US denominated stable coin, they'll give you 10%, 11% interest. So there's a door is opening for people who save their money right now. If you're poor and you're saving your money, you're putting in a bank, you're losing money because you're losing money against inflation. It's a losing proposition. That's why it's harder and harder to make money. But if you're able to get into some of these investments, which were only available for the wealthy class, you have an opportunity to move up so it's one of your reflections on that. I know, by the way, this is none of the stuff that we had on the list of questions to ask you, but it's just,
so if you break down what capitalism is this tension between two sometimes opposing forces, labor and capital, right? And the problem in America right now is that there used to be a very fluid membrane between labor and capital. You would start out as labor, and there was always a chance for you to become capital, which means that you are part of the ownership class versus the working class. And people used to go back and forth. And that's what we used to describe as upward mobility, right? And that's what created this idea of this American dream where anybody could become extremely successful. And now there are these schisms and there are these barriers that prevent that from happening. And so if you break that down, underneath one of those ideas is you don't give labor, the overwhelming majority of people, access to the ability to save and earn so that they could actually become capital, right? Like, let's just say that you are, working and you're saving towards starting a small business. Just a simple example. Well, how are you supposed to save and earn? What are you supposed to do? To your point, you stick it in a bank account where you get 0.015%. That's a path to nowhere, right? And so people then do what? They're supposed to stick it into a stock market. Okay, but if you don't know and you're not taught financial literacy anymore, how are you actually going to build wealth that way? And so there are all these systemic barriers to actually moving from labor to capital. So if you think about what tokenization as an example does, it actually makes that fundamentally easier. What it also does is it does it in a deregulated way. And that's also very important. So in the traditional financial infrastructure, again, go back to the cartels that we have, the insiders versus outsiders that we have. Government regulation prevents you from actually getting access to those return streams. They will say, Francis, you're not rich enough.
You're not smart enough. Yeah.
No. But this is even worse. They say you're not rich enough to actually be rich.
Right. Because
you may, and look, I've spent enough time with you. You're smart, right? And there are a lot of 20 somethings that are really, really smart, but they have no money because maybe they had just graduated. They have a great job, but they're stuck in debt. So we have laws that basically reinforce insiders versus outsiders and regulatory capture. But again, if you go over here to crypto, those laws don't exist. And now all of a sudden, that 25-year-old kid who's just a really smart person, they and a community of other people can come together, help each other, and create an ecosystem that actually can generate capital where it didn't exist. And now folks that otherwise would be, part of labor now has a path to be part of capital. This is, I think, why psychologically so many people are attracted to crypto. They came initially because of Bitcoin. They were enamored with that idea, but then they stayed because there is a fundamental fairness for people who are willing to do the work, not people who accidentally won the genetic lottery, right? Or inherited wealth, or, went to the right school. All of that stuff, again, back to using those are labels that don't scale anymore. That's not a path to anything.
Amazing. Wow. For me, it's this incredibly new world that we're sort of embarking on that energizes me from a city perspective. We've tried to use technology to deal with very specific things, like, for example, crime, right? Unfortunately, we have shootings just like any other major urban city. But we have a gunfire detection system. Now we're trying to come up with a second generation, and I'm open sourcing this as well as an idea of some drone technology that can use the geoposition of the gunfire to follow and ultimately allow for the arrest of people who are engaged in drive-by shootings. And that's something that I think can help solve that problem for urban America. Same with homelessness. You know what I mean? We have 555 homeless in our city, according to the last census. And, we have what we call net zero or functional zero homeless, veteran homeless, as defined by the federal government. We want to get to functional zero homeless and then export that and scale that to urban America. So there are some challenges that I think we can overcome as a city, that we can export based on some basic principles. Listen, we keep taxes as low as possible. And you know what's happened when we've kept taxes as low as possible, reducing our millage rate to the second lowest rate since the 1960s? Our budget has increased.
Yeah.
It's actually doubled in size. So
counterintuitive.
We went from 600 when I started here in 2009 to 1.1 billion in 12 years. We've doubled in size. So the more attractive we make the city, the safer we make the city, the more people want to come here. And then we don't have artificial growth constraints like other cities do, whether they're either built out or they just say you can't build anymore. We have 10x growth capacity in our city. We can grow 10 times larger in size. So we're trying to create a model. And then the last thing about the model is it's simple, right? Which is, I've learned this, took me 43 years to learn this simple fact. The most precious thing in life, the most precious thing that we have is our time, period. Nobody has been able to figure out, unless you love Back to the Future, how to live yesterday again. So literally the most important decision that you make and that we're making, and this is why I'm so honored to have you right now. This is the most important decision that you're making in your life, is where you're spending this moment, because once this moment leaves, you can't get it back. So you have given me the most precious asset in your life, which is your time. And we want to create the kind of city that understands that phenomenon, that is experiential in nature, that has the best sports offerings, the best cultural offerings, the best intellectual offerings, so that, like you said, the doers and the innovators are drawn to us as what I call the capital of capital, a place where everyone, there's a confluence of capital from different places, and where if you want to start a company, this is the best place to be. That's sort of our philosophy.
Well, I mean, look, you whether it was by design or not, you've been able to pull two entire industries. Finance was the heartbeat of New York, and technology was the heartbeat of San Francisco, and you've managed to pull both of them in to Miami. Now, some finance is in Palm Beach, and it's a little bit further north, but the point is there's enough of the young and folks, that first generation of folks, who will eventually probably just stay in Miami once they take over those businesses or start their own. So the point is, what does it mean? It means that people are voting with their time. They want to be around other like-minded, smart people. They want to see good capital allocation from their politicians. They want, cleanliness, safety, culture, fun, so that the time that they have, that they can spend it in a valuable, memorable way. The formula, to your point, is not hard. None of that has to do with labels. None of that has to do with trying to appease a certain cohort of the political spectrum. And the minute you can actually say enough of that nonsense, you do a simple number of things. You reach out to people, you send some tweets. I'm not trying to downplay what you've done for a second, but I'm just trying to say you're winning. And so how is it possible, Francis, that every other mayor, every governor, and most federal politicians have not figured this out, and you have? And you're doing it. It's like, it's not even a secret. It's in plain sight, and nobody's willing to copy it. And that is the insanity of it.
I don't have an answer for that. All I can tell you is I realized pretty soon thereafter, the initial tweet, that it was a clear runway, that I was a monopoly essentially. And I just couldn't believe it. And I thought for sure this was going to end soon, listen, I've been very blessed. I've had a lot of mayors reach out. Some of it.
You're going to be the head of the Conference of Mayors, right?
I'm going to be president in January.
In January. I mean, I think that's going to be an important sea change as well, because folks will be hard pressed to not want to follow. Like, what is it of Miami that's happened over the last few years that other cities don't want? What exactly is the feature that they feel is a bug?
I'll tell you that they do. And it's funny. Today I was my first Cafecito Tech Talk, which was one of the things that I created in this whole moment. And you're sort of having one with me now informally. I was wearing a 412 area code. So for everyone who was watching me wear a 412 area code, they're probably thinking, what the hell is this guy lost his mind? It's 305 is where he's from, right? And it's actually Pittsburgh's area code. And the reason why I was wearing it was because the Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce reached out to me and they said, hey, we see what you're doing down there. We want the secret sauce. We want to know what it takes to succeed. And so we went through the whole thing and they sent me this really nice shirt. So I wore it today as sort of an ode to them, a thumbs up to them. But I think a lot of cities are noticing Vice Mayor of Broward, Mayor of Fort Lauderdale, Mayor of Jacksonville has called me on the crypto initiatives. I've gotten calls from, I saw the Mayor of Reno the other day was getting involved. So there's so much momentum right now.
Can I give you a plug to do something?
Sure.
I would love to see you issue some form of Bitcoin denominated debt.
Okay.
Because you guys put these general obligation bonds out there. They're typically denominated in US dollars.
Yep.
I think it would be incredibly disruptive for the traditional capital markets to see basically a backstop entity like a city, a state issue a crypto denominated debt instrument. Well, I'm not sure if it's possible. I don't even know the laws, but if you could do it, I think it would be.
I think it would require some law changes, but we've actually had talked about holding it as an asset on our asset class. So sort of doing the opposite almost, instead of issuing it as debt, having it as an asset because we have a treasury. But regardless, I mean, I think the point is that these are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about so that we continue to push the envelope and send the message that Miami, it wants to be on the forefront of innovation, and that we understand that the innovation economy is here to stay. And you have two options. You can run from it to your city's detriment, or you can embrace it and prepare your residents, every single resident. We call it Miami for everyone. We create a Miami that's for everyone. So every single resident can participate in that success. Chamath, we run out of time. Brother, thank you so much for giving me your most precious asset, which is your time and your brilliance. Thank you.
Francis, thank you for everything you're doing.
Hope to see you soon again, brother.
Thanks, man. Take care, bro. Bye. Bye, guys.